Hi,
My name's J.C. McCauley.
I'm Nyesha McCauley, and you're watching AccessTV.org.
Okay, my friends, it's time once again to get our talk on. It's Morning Talk with me, your host, J.C. McCauley, along with the champions of talk. This morning's talk champion, none other than Jonathan Small. Good morning, Jonathan. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Stan. It's good to be back here again. Look forward to it every particular week. And hopefully we get off to a real good start this morning.
All right. You had a good weekend?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of okay. I mean, nothing really spectacular. And the weather was kind of nice, particularly yesterday. And didn't really do too much. I ran a lot of errands, I think Saturday and Sunday, but particularly yesterday. And watched the Sunday night NFL game.
Sunday night NFL?
Pretty interesting game.
Yeah. It was an interesting football day. Tom Terrific didn't deliver.
I heard Tampa Bay lost.
Yeah, Tampa Bay lost by 1 point, and a lot of But next Sunday will be a repeat of bring your. Look at, I got the graphics are all jacked up this morning. We'll get it right.
Okay.
Bring Your Son to Work Day Part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah, Tom Brady and Mahomes.
Oh boy, that's a big game. I didn't even pick up on that.
Yeah, that's next week. Yeah, Bring Your Son to Work Day Part 2.
Tampa Bay. Yeah, that's Tampa Bay against Kansas City. So that's gonna be the that's gonna be the game of the week.
Yeah,
most likely they'll classify it as the game. if it's on Fox 61, they'll classify that as the game of the week.
Yeah,
and Cowboys actually play tonight. Monday night game.
Monday night.
Yeah, the Eagles looked very sharp yesterday, I heard.
Mm-hmm.
New England lost yesterday.
Yeah, they lost. Yeah.
And Miami kind of upsetted the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, them games wasn't on television. Only a few games locally. They put, I think this game was I was watching on and off. It really wasn't the best game. Well, actually, New England was playing on television against Baltimore, and Baltimore beat New England.
Yeah, the Ravens.
They looked pretty good. But we'll just see how things go. I mean, Monday night NFL. I think Sunday night NFL now has surpassed Monday night NFL. It's one of the highest ratings events on television, Sunday night NFL.
Oh, people are home on Sunday nights.
That might be, yeah.
And, of course, you got to go to work on Monday. Well, that's true. You got to go to work Sunday night. You got to get up for work on Monday too. So I don't know. I
can't figure it out.
I can't figure it out.
Well, I think people are so used to Sunday football schedule, and they put the game on television Sunday night, particularly basic television. It's on NBC, where I believe Monday night football is now on ESPN. But see, what I do, even if I don't have cable, I just download it on my phone, and you can watch it. Pretty much, if you know exactly how to pick it up on. It's not always guaranteed that you can pick it up on, but ESPN, you can log into an app and watch the game on your smartphone like you're watching it. It's not quite I guess it's similar, but not still like a television.
Well, it depends on how close you are to the TV, because the perspective of the TV across the room is about the same size as your phone up close. So yeah. And particularly if you're wearing earbuds.
Right.
Yeah. Well, Thursday night football. Do you watch Thursday night football?
I don't. I think I'm usually working at that time. The Thursday night come on at 8:00.
Yeah.
So it's kind of hard for me. I mean, I could check. If it's my team playing, I will, watch it on my phone when I get a break. But Thursday night NFL does come on, and they had a pretty interesting game, I heard.
Yeah. I watch it on Amazon.
Oh, you do?
Yeah. Amazon has Thursday night football, which is pretty cool.
Oh, okay.
They got all kind of stats and this, that, and the third. It's it just
Amazon. So you just download to Amazon and you
Yeah, so if you watch like Amazon Prime or you go to video and it's right there at the top of the header of the screen, and it's boom.
Yeah.
You watch it.
The beauty of technology.
Beauty
how
of technology.
Things have changed, where you can watch things now on demand or pretty much differently.
Yeah, and the latest thing is from what I was talking to my wife, and you know, I was gonna make a comment. As I was talking to my wife, I was debating on whether or not to say the bearer of all wisdom and knowledge. That's what hemmed me up. But we were talking, and she was saying that you know, Netflix and all these other people are gonna start offering advertising, which would put a lot of pressure on everybody else because there's only so much advertising dollars. So the online offerings are surpassing a lot of the the traditional media, whether it's print, television. So
it's changed the game
it's
completely.
changed the game, and you can take it with your phone. Can't beat that.
You can't beat that. I mean, that's what the beauty about the smartphone information age that we're in. You can pretty much get anything you're looking for just about on the tip of your finger with your phone. And that is a real benefit, I think, because it just keeps you abreast on many different things, not just sports, many different things. So,
well, it gives you access to information, but not wisdom. There's a difference.
There's a difference
with
wisdom.
Well, speaking of wisdom, it is Monday, which means that we always are joined by special guests that bring us their wisdom, knowledge, and great information. And, of course, today is no different. And so we'll turn the floor over to Mr. Jonathan and let him introduce our special guest for this morning.
Okay, this morning on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley's Talk Show, we have a returning guest to the network who has been on All About You Face to Face. He's been on more this particular show, Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley Talk Show, twice. This is his third appearance, and he just stands out as a world-known economist. I'm talking no other than the Emeritus, Barings, distinguished professor, I believe retired professor, also from UConn. He also has served in Cambridge, Massachusetts, the UK, where he currently resides, no other than Professor John Glascock. Good morning, John. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jonathan. Thanks for having me on.
John, it's our pleasure. Even though you've been on the network several different times, for people out there, could you kind of let people know a little bit about yourself and background before we get into our topics of discussion?
Good. As you said, I teach, I've taught economics, but there at UConn, I was a professor of real estate and urban studies. We try to think about why certain cities grow or don't grow and how we can help cities. I also, as you said, was the Grosvenor professor at the University of Cambridge in the United Kingdom, and have taught in Asia and Europe as well.
Well, John, I can't think of a better economist than you, and I will go on record saying I think you're one of the best in the world, and I don't say that just because you're here. But, John, when you get into economies, the latest trend seems to be this inflation that we have been experiencing. I guess it's worldwide, but particularly in the United States. What has really caused the inflation to skyrocket at this current state, John?
Well, there's really three factors to the current inflation. First, during COVID, we tried to help people feel good and keep them buying goods and living. So we printed a lot of money and we sent people checks. And now what people did with most of that is they didn't spend it. If you go back and look, the savings rate in the USA actually went up. So they came out of this COVID event with more money in their pocket, right? And then they'd like to spend that. And normally when you have more money in your pocket, it pulls up demand for goods. But secondly, COVID reduced the amount of supply worldwide, particularly of some critical goods. In terms of automobiles, they couldn't get the chips because of some problems in China and other places. So there was a very severe shortage of cars, even used cars. So the prices went up significantly. At the same time, you kind of have a third event, and that is the war in Ukraine. And then one of the things that Europe, Japan, and the USA did was to try to have sanctions on Russia. But then Russia turned around and played a game and said, okay, we won't give you oil or gas if you're in Europe. And that really severely pulled up the price of energy worldwide. So you've got people with more money in the United States wanting to spend it. You've got a reduced supply of goods, particularly in some of the capital goods like automobiles. And then third, you have energy prices going really high because of the Ukraine war. You also had one other factor in there, and that's house prices had been going up, primarily because governments in the United States tried to stymie the building of houses. Just very difficult in California, some parts of Texas and Florida to build more houses. So that pulled the prices up. Now, all those together have given us higher prices, and that's inflation.
Well, John, also, what about the fact that wages hasn't kept up with the cost of living? Doesn't that play a role into inflation? Into inflation as well? That if your wages don't keep up with the cost of living, that's also a contributing factor.
Well, actually, if wages don't keep up, that actually lowers inflation. Okay. Mm-hmm. However, it hurts your standard of living. So you're not going to live very well if your wages aren't going up, but the prices are going up. I think the primary reason that wages are not going up is in the United States, we have allowed the large corporations become a bigger percent of our economy. Since about 1990, every year since 1990, the top 100 companies in America have become a larger part of our GDP. Now, when that occurs, they have more control in the labor market and they try to keep wages down. So we kind of have a structural problem that we need more competition, and we need to break up those companies so they would pay fairer wages and higher wages. And they won't do it voluntarily. They will deliberately try to keep wages down if you allow them to do that. And this is kind of classic economic theory. I mean, I studied this back in 1968 in my first economics class, and it hasn't changed since then.
Well, John, what about the fact that if there's a worker shortage throughout the country and many employers are having a difficult time filling job positions, and they start to increase a normal wage, let's say a normal wage, someone from a company ordinarily would be paying someone, let's say $15 an hour. But because the company can't find enough people to fill that particular position, then they offer other incentives. And then let's say they pay that same job position now $20 an hour. That's still not the best solution, in your opinion, towards keeping up with the cost of living, towards increasing your wages?
Yeah, I do think in the USA, one of the things that we're behind on is raising the wages of a normal worker. Someone who works at McDonald's, someone who works at Burger King, someone who drives local delivery trucks, someone who works at your Kroger, someone who works at Walmart. Those local wages are way too low. We don't need $15 an hour, but we need roughly $30 an hour. Now, how do you pay $30 an hour and keep your costs down? Productivity. The right thing to do is invest in the way we organize our work and the technology that we use to help workers work. And when you do that correctly, you can actually pay workers more. Let me give you a simple example: Costco versus Walmart. Costco on average pays about double the wages and benefits that Walmart does. However, as a percent of sales, labor costs at both companies are the same. So this higher labor cost is not costing Costco more money because their productivity per employee is nearly double the productivity at Walmart. Now, part of this is philosophy. When you're a new cashier at Walmart, in many cases, you don't even work a full day before you start actually working on the cash register. Now, the next cash register may have a person to help you, but you're right there working. At Costco, in many cases, it's 4 weeks to 6 weeks before you're doing the job because they train you. There's a lot more training. There's a lot more organization in terms of thinking about how to help the worker work at Costco than there is at Walmart. So they're paying double the wages, double the benefits, but their total cost per dollar sale is the same at Walmart. So in some cases, this is just philosophy of the firm. They prefer lower labor costs, even though they have more turnover, where other firms like Costco are investing in a worker. If you also look at how long workers stay with Costco, is tremendously longer than how long workers stay at Walmart. So this is partly a market condition of the firms, and it's not something magic that cheap labor helps you. No, at Costco, higher price labor helped you a lot.
Well, is Costco like a unique company that they're doing something unique towards sharing, I guess, the wages towards their profit? Because if you take a company like Walmart and you based upon their profit margin, Walmart, just like Amazon, can clearly afford to pay its workers more money. But also the fact, John, let's say supply and demand theory, that if you have a job or industry where it's very easy to find and displace and replace many different workers, you really don't need to pay them pretty much a higher wage, because you could always get someone that's capable of doing the same type of job.
Yeah, in some cases, if you have too much supply of labor, then it may be easier just to hire cheap labor who you can replace easily rather than doing training. Okay. Mm-hmm. But let me give you a simple story. This happened back in the 1920s with Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company was having trouble keeping employees. I mean, the average worker only worked 2 to 3 months a year, and they couldn't increase their productivity. So you remember Henry Ford started offering $5 a day. Now, he and his public relations machine lied and said later that was to help the workers own a car. No. He wanted higher productivity. And what he really did was he paid him the same rate as normal, but he kept the rest of that $5 to the end of the year as a bonus. Now, that enabled them to get workers staying longer so they could train them and work with them. Within 2 years of this policy, with that new training, with new technology, the $5 a day was costing Ford less money per car than the original $2 a day was. Because again, just like with Costco, the firm and the workers made a commitment to productivity. Emerson Electric in America today, you should go look at them. They're doing the same thing. They pay really high wages, not $30 an hour. Their workers make like $100,000 to $120,000 a year as line workers. But their productivity is one of the highest in the world because they made this commitment to help the workers be trained, to help them do their job, and to give them the right technology. So what we should be doing in America, paying the workers higher and changing that rate of productivity.
Well, John, how does the union movement contribute towards a higher wage? It seems like automatically if you take a company and it's part of a labor union, the wages always seem to increase so much higher comparable to a non-union occupation. So what is the strategy how a union can automatically get the wages and benefits and insurance for its employees much higher comparable to a non-union operation?
Well, part of it is when it's a non-union operation, you can't bargain well with the company. Mm-hmm. So as you pointed out earlier, the company may simply look for cheap labor. Ford and GM today might send that car to be manufactured in Mexico at a lower wage, or maybe even some parts come from China. But if you have a union and the union is strong, now most unions in the U.S. today are pretty weak. Okay, they've gotten much weaker over time than they used to be. But if the union has a strong position, it can force Ford or GM to pay the higher wage. Then they have to think about ways to become more productive. So you kind of make them become more productive by thinking about how to make the workers more productive instead of just hiring cheap labor and working it out in the labor market. So both management and unions are good and they're both bad. They both have some problems. They both have some good attributes.
Mm-hmm. Well, John, isn't the job market and let's say the job growth and business growth is growing throughout the United States towards many non-unionized states and many states with lower taxes? Again, I mean, are you better off actually working and living in a state with a lower cost of living, with a lower wage, or are you somewhat better off living in a higher wage state with a higher cost of living? I guess it comes down to the individual too, but I mean, for business purposes, it seems like more businesses, if you take a look at our index throughout the country, like Texas, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, many of your right to work states, they seem to be drawing a higher business growth and even population growth comparable to unionized states like New York, Illinois, California, and other northeastern, midwestern states.
Yeah, well, some of that is the way the population is moving. But here's the real trick. In most cases today, you're better off to live in a relatively high union, high wage state if you can get a job. For example, let's take California. California by far is the wealthiest state in the country. And you as a person working there, as a nurse, as a school teacher, as a truck driver, you're going to make more money. Now, you do hear that it's hard to buy a house. I agree. That's bad government who's limited building of houses. But also, if you live in Connecticut or Massachusetts, you tend to live longer, just like you do in California, because we have better medical care and we have a cleaner environment. If we go to Mississippi, one of the poorest states in the union, you tend to die a lot younger because there are more health hazards and problems. Now, there is a shift toward Texas a little bit, toward Florida, North Carolina, as you said. Most of that has to do with where industry used to be and where industry would like to be today. In the old days, industry went to transportation hubs, New York City, LA, Memphis, Chattanooga, Savannah, Chicago, Cleveland. You had great water and you had great railroads. However, over time, transportation cost, and Glazer, one of the professors at Harvard, has got a great paper on this who explains in detail. Over time, transportation costs have dropped significantly. It's far cheaper to move things than it used to be. So those transportation hubs have lost some of their advantage. Not only have they lost some of their advantage, but let's look at New York City. New York City, everything used to come into the city and then it got distributed. Now everything goes down to the port in New Jersey. It doesn't come into the city. Or if you go to LA, Long Beach, the largest port in America by far, okay? It doesn't come into Los Angeles itself, it comes out of town. So the money that used to get spent in Chicago, in New York, in Memphis, in Savannah is no longer there. So those cities don't get that money. So a lot of the jobs left because transportation dropped. At the same time, manufacturing was associated with those cities, and the percentage of people in manufacturing has dropped. So those cities have old cities and high costs, but they're not getting money from the manufacturing or the transportation. Now, you're sitting here as a new person in tech or something else, and you want to move to a city. You could move to an old city. It's not just north-south. It could be Savannah, it could be New Orleans, it could be Memphis, it could be Chattanooga, or it could be Chicago or New York. And they're going to say, come on over. We'd love to have some of your tax money to help us with our problems. Or you could say, no. I'm going to go to Columbus, Ohio, or Indianapolis. I'm going to go to Texas. I'm going to Florida, because they're not going to make me pay for the problems that you're stuck with. So part of this is a shifting away from cities that didn't handle this transfer from an old manufacturing transport economy to a new service tech economy. They didn't handle it well, and they want somebody else to pay for it. And you, as a manufacturing company, you as a service company, you scratch your head and say, no, I'll be happy to start over somewhere else because I don't need those cost burdens.
Stan, I don't know if you have any questions or any comments you want to address to our guest this morning.
No, I'm listening.
You know, listening mode?
I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm listening.
All right.
Yeah. I do have a question, but I'll wait because I don't want to change the subject.
Oh, okay. All right. Nothing wrong with that. John, one last thing about inflation, though. If you look at trends towards inflation, isn't many countries throughout the world, many countries, let's say in the Caribbean, Latin America, has had a high inflation structure for a very long time? And the United States kind of goes through different spans or different trends of inflation. So how could some countries throughout the world get locked into inflation where it never seems to decrease, and the United States can have trends where the inflation goes up and it comes down? Okay,
first, what you want to think about is inflation is what is actually going on in the economy. Every time there's inflation, someone is trying to steal from you, the normal worker, the normal citizen. Now, recently, that was Russia. We're trying to cut off that price of raise the price of gasoline, raise the price of also commodities that were coming out of Ukraine, et cetera. Okay. Now, in the United States, if we go back to the early 70s, the government, Lyndon Johnson and his famous Vietnam War, he wanted to pay for it and he didn't want to raise taxes. So he was using inflation, monetary power, in order to steal from we citizens instead of just saying to us, we're going to raise your taxes and take money from you. He tried to hide it. And he tried to take it through the inflation. Now, it didn't work. We got mad. Volcker came in. We had high interest rates. We lowered the monetary supply and we got control again. Mm-hmm. So in most countries, the citizens of a developed world, Japan, Germany, the United States, we sort of stand up and say, okay, we don't like that cheating. We don't like what you're doing. In many of these countries, Argentina and others that you mentioned, they have continual inflation because their government is unwilling to put a tax on people that they find hard to collect. So they steal the money through inflation. And so that's simply the government taking things from them. And there, the middle and upper class cannot control the government. So the government gets away with that theft. Whereas in the USA, we generally get mad. We vote for leaders that kind of put this thing back in order.
John, one current news report is indicating that the United States is on the verge of entering a recession. Now, I always thought a recession was classified to some degree when it was very difficult to find employment. But there might be other definitions of a recession beyond just that factor, obviously. But how can you be going into, let's say, a recessionary trend if you have so much employers and so much work that's taking place, and it's very easy to find jobs today, comparable when a normal recession, what I thought meant it's very difficult to find employment?
Yeah, that's a difference between an economist who has these narrow definitions and then the public like you and me who would think it's about jobs and the ability to get a good job. Technically, we have a recession when we had 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. And it doesn't say anything about unemployment. It's just now normally you have lower GDP growth when you do have high unemployment because people are not working and they're not producing things. So GDP goes down. Right now, we do have people working and we do have people who can generally find jobs. Now, I'm not sure there's as many good jobs as there should be. And let me give you a very small example there. In America, we have a lot of people go to college, okay? One of the largest in the world, probably nearly double what other countries do. And yet, since about probably 1995, the real value of going to college has been decreasing. Now, it's increasing if you compare it to somebody who doesn't graduate from high school. And sometimes that's the comparison they make, and that's an unfair comparison. Those wages are going down so fast that even if you weren't getting a better wage coming out of college, you'd be winning compared to them. But real jobs for college grads have been decreasing, at least since about 2005, because today probably half the people who graduate from college will take a non-college qualified job. Even assistant managers at Burger King, at McDonald's, and trainee managers at Walmart today, many of them, if not most, have a college degree. That's kind of absurd. So what you have in our economy is lots of jobs that don't pay well enough and lots of jobs compared to how educated we are. Now, part of that's a productivity problem because the firms haven't invested to get that productivity up so we could put more people in these better jobs. But we're going into recession because 2 consecutive quarters with GDP decline means there's a recession. Now, people won't feel that in the same way as back in the day when you both had GDP decline and high unemployment.
Well, you just mentioned something, John, about the college grad not being able to find the type of job or to make the type of earnings that they had invested in the college. But also you hear reports that there's, I guess, a tremendous problem of finding people, particularly young people that can enter the building trades industries, that many vocational trades, occupations, they're having a very difficult time keeping up with the demand. And some of these industries, I think, pay higher wages. So if you have a situation, John, let's say like electrician, can make more than a college grad, but yet many young people particularly are not looking at the building trades industries and not looking at this as a career. How does this affect the overall U.S. economy when you have industries that people are not entering in and you're not getting enough employees in a particular field of work?
Yeah, okay. There's a couple of things going on here. First is one of the reasons you don't want to go in the construction industry today is you're not sure how stable your employment will be. That is, like right now, these high interest rate that the Fed's imposing on the economy would put you out of work. Because they're not building as many houses in California or Texas or North Carolina. So you're really subject to a high variance. Now, secondly, when you get a field such as construction, I'm going to compare it to agriculture. What should happen over time is you should have innovations that make that field very productive so that we can pay people a high wage. Because the variance on you losing your job makes you need a higher wage. Now, let's take agriculture, for example. Back in 1870, you used to have a sickle and you went out and whished the wheat and you processed the wheat. Well, today with a combine, I'm told that a normal combine in the Midwest displaces over 1,000 workers in that old model. We can now pay over $1 million for that combine, and we can pay the driver $95,000 to $120,000 a year to drive the combine. And that really solved the labor problem in agriculture. Now, in construction, my own view is a good electrician should be making $100,000, $150,000 a year because there's a high variance in that job and it's high skilled. And I'm going to tell you that electrician, I retired at 72 from UConn, and it wasn't very stressful. Now, you had to work, you had to think, you had to work with people and be nice, but I didn't crawl around in the attic on my knees. I didn't run into 2x4s, hit me in the back when I'm putting that electricity in. Most electricians are not going to make it to 72 in a meaningful way. So they need to be paid more during the period they work. Now, secondly, we need more technology. In the USA, we do virtually no manufactured housing. I'm not talking about mobile homes. I'm talking if you go to Germany or some of the other highly productive countries like us, they've learned how to make houses in the plant. The electrician is like 8 times more productive than he or she is out in the field, and they get paid better. And we can put a house on the ground that's better built, better insulated at lower cost. But we've kind of refused to do that in the USA. We've kept this old model of carpenters, and it's not the right model. The right model is we need some combines, just like agriculture, and we need to raise that wage, and we need to be more efficient. That's the trick to lowering prices for you and me, making a profit, and paying the workers more. Just like happened to Ford back in the 20s. He paid them $5, he got productivity up, price of the car went down, wages went up, and Ford's profits went up. Now that's a win-win-win.
Stan, let me ask you one question and kind of bring you into this conversation. You mentioned many different times that it's a good partnership or it's a good relation when it could be mutually beneficial. Let's say, for instance, as an employee and an employer, you're both getting a good benefits. The employer is getting something that he's looking for, and the employee is getting something that they're looking for. But many times you'll find that it's somewhat of an imbalance, that sometimes your employees don't feel like they're getting what they deserve to get. And then sometimes you might hear the company owner is having problems with the workers doing an adequate job, other issues that they're bringing to the company. Is there a way that you can kind of guarantee, what's the best way to make something mutually beneficial? Related towards our topic, is just a company paying a decent wage, benefits, insurance, an employee doing a good job, no complaining, no underlining problems that they're bringing to the job. Isn't that kind of what you call a mutual beneficial?
Well, I think, I think that, the kind of mutual benefit, in my opinion, that you're talking about is a byproduct of, work ethic and good management. The opportunity for mutual benefit is is there. The employer needs someone to do work that he or she can't do themselves, so they hire somebody. And the person that's looking for a job needs a job, and so they go to work. So, who's happy depends upon, the opportunity for mutual benefit is present.
Okay.
You can't guarantee that the employee is going to be happy, and you can't guarantee that the employer is going to be. It's not; those aren't, to me, guarantees. That it requires cooperation and a good work environment. I would say.
John, were you going to say something related to this question or this comment?
Well, I would have the same thing. I think, look, generally in America, people don't vote for unions unless management has been horrible. Look, people started out at Amazon loving the fact that they had jobs and there was this great company they're working for. And then as Amazon got, I'm going to say, kind of more cruel, they then decided, well, we may have to vote for unions. If management treats people fairly, pays them fairly, generally in America, people do not vote for unions. However, when the company kind of squeeze out the last nickel from you, you vote in unions to kind of make the game more fair. But I think the real trick, as Stan said, is good management should treat workers fair and workers should work. Now, my own experience, and I'm an old guy, I'm going to be a few months, I'm going to be 73. And I have never been in an organization when workers did not want to work that were treated fairly. Now, I do find in the United States or in Taiwan or in the UK or in China where I've worked, if workers believe they're being treated unfairly, they get a bit testy. Okay. They decide that, wait a minute, this game is not fair. So, I think the real trick to this is competition in the marketplace. If you go back to your kind of freshman year in college, if you went to college, and if you took economics, they will talk about oligopolies. Now, that's big firms where, like Microsoft and Intel and Google, very few companies run a game in an industry. And what they will tell you is what happens is the following. They reduce the number of workers at the local level. 2, they reduce the middle management people, the marketing people, the accounting people. 3, they reduce wages of the workers. They reduce wages of the middle management. Then they raise prices and they pay management and the stockholders more. That's exactly what we've seen since about 1990 in America. These bigger companies, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, have paid the executives more. They've tried to squeeze the workers. They've tried to squeeze the middle management. And so the right way to fix this is break them up and let there be competition. And then you'll have a much better marketplace naturally. Because if you're smaller companies, you have to get your workers to work hard. You have to be nice to them to be competitive. If you're Amazon, you kind of got a monopoly power and you don't have to be as nice.
Well, recently the U.S. just, I guess, diverted like a possibility of a railroad train strike. There was some type of talk a few weeks ago that in the railroad industry that there was a possibility of that particular field going into a strike, meaning that many of the workers who work in that industry was, I guess, on the verge of striking. And they said that would have been devastating towards the U.S. economy. But then I heard the possibility of next year, UPS is talking about going on strike if certain demands are not met. Now, it would appear on the outside, John, let's say particularly with UPS, that they make high wages, they get a good pension plan, they get good benefits. I know there's some issues with not having air conditioning in the truck, and I think there was a death related towards a heat incident of a UPS driver. So that clearly can outweigh wages and benefits. And then also there's some factors that you may not realize that sometime a UPS worker could be working 12 hours a day, sometime even 6 days a week, which could be draining on your body. So for people on the outside, they may not fully understand exactly what the employee and what the employer is really going through. But what's your take on the UPS Teamsters Union issues that they're currently having?
Yeah, well, again, my own view, here's the first thing I would ask you when you're looking at an industry. How long does the worker actually work in that industry? And I'm going to give you another example just so we don't talk about the truckers right now. If you're in mining in Colorado or in West Virginia, do you think there are any 40, 45, and 50-year-old, tenure minors? We get people in academia who work 40 years, 45 years, okay? And we get doctors, MDs, who work 45 years, all right? But, when I visit West Virginia as a child, because some of my family did work in the mines there, I didn't notice a lot of people working 45 years in the mining industry. And so you've got to take into account how tough the job is. I believe the UPS job is very tough. I do not believe they'll be able to put in 30, 40 years in that job because of the stress. So you need to take that into account in terms of the wages. And I don't think UPS will unless you make them, because there's only two big companies now, right? There's FedEx and there's UPS. Now, yes, Walmart has their own delivery system, which is very efficient. But in terms of the public, there's only those two, and that's an oligopoly. All right. And so what they try to do is what? Raise their prices, reduce their workers, give the executives more money. That's exactly what they've done. So I don't think their wages are high enough. I think the best way to fix it is break them up. Break FedEx in half, break UPS in half. And by the way, let me remind you back when Ma Bell gave you any phone that you wanted as long as it was black. Okay, I grew up in Tennessee where our first phone was a party line.
Yeah.
When the phone rang, everybody had, "Oh, it's for you, Joe." Everybody else hung up politely. And then we broke up Ma Bell and we started the 10 regions. And within nothing, we got colored phones, we got lower prices, we got free long distance. And then voila, we got mobile phones, which you were talking about, smartphones. You were talking about earlier, Jonathan. I do not believe that smartphones, they'd have been 20 years later if you'd have kept Ma Bell, because Ma Bell had you paying rent on black phones and they got the money. Why should they be more innovative? After you broke up Ma Bell, we had a lot more workers in that industry, a lot more middle managers, a lot more accountants, a lot more marketing people, a lot more research people. A lot of people had better jobs, all right? But like with UPS and FedEx, when you get too big, we call them deadwood in economics. And that's the real problem with UPS. Wages need to go up and they need to be more innovative and more productive, okay?
Well, and then again, also, I think the working conditions, I think, and there may be some factors why the trucks, doesn't have air conditioning. They claim that the door is open, so it really wouldn't be that useful, because you'll be losing cold air going out the door. But I still think you would be better off having an air conditioned system in a truck and let me figure out, keeping the door closed and open. But that's one argument that UPS claim why they don't want to implement an air conditioned system in the trucks is because they would be losing. They claim it really wouldn't be serving a good purpose because the doors have to stay open. But that's not actually true, because I've worked on UPS. They can close the door. So I don't know where they come up with that argument.
But wait a minute, but Jonathan, it really reduces your productivity that day. And that's all that UPS management wants. They're not thinking about you. And the only way they'll think about you is if you break them up so there are smaller companies working to win, and they know they have to think about you because they want you to help them be productive. UPS is too big, FedEx is too big, and they're more worried about pushing you as a worker than they are about making you more productive and taking care of your health.
Let's switch the topic. One thing we was talking a few days ago, but obviously I want to talk about it now, about state government. And some people criticize Connecticut as our state government is too big. I mean, they made some comparisons that Connecticut state government is almost the same size as North Carolina state government, but yet our population is so much less. Is state government needed to be big? I mean, do you have to have a big state government to really run your government on a state level?
Well, the real trick there, first of all, I agree North Carolina has more population, okay? And I have a daughter who works down at Duke University as one of the medical accountants, so I know that place pretty well. But look, in Connecticut, where I've lived for a long time in a state I really enjoy living in, okay? You have a lot more services than you do in North Carolina,
okay?
Right? And generally, our incomes are a lot higher in Connecticut. And when people make higher income, they want more education. That is, they want more college. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They also want more services. And generally, those services cost money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so one of the reasons that Connecticut has more government is we're richer and we want those services. So what I would start with is ask the question, what service is it that you currently get in the state that you'd either be happy to do without, or there'd be a convenient way to mechanize it? I mean, one of the things that happened when I lived there is we fixed it where I lived in West Hartford.
Mm-hmm.
We fixed it where you can look online for your taxes. And matter of fact, I set mine up so they just sent me a notice. I went online and paid them. All right, whether it be my car tax, the personal property tax, or whether it be my other taxes, or even if you got a ticket, you could go online and pay that ticket. Okay, it was a parking ticket, not a speeding ticket. All right, so some things we can make more mechanical like that and reduce our cost and reduce the number of people. But either A, what service are you getting currently that you either think we can just do away with, or that you believe we can mechanize? And that's where I would start. Because when you're fairly wealthy, you do want more services.
Mm-hmm. You know, I was probably going to wanted to talk about this with Stan after your guest appearance, but I'm glad that you're on the program now, because we debate this, you know, back and forth sometime about urban cities and suburbanized cities. Now, West Hartford, Connecticut is ranked as the best livable city and town in Connecticut for 5 consecutive years. John, is it kind of hard to figure out how a city like West Hartford can be so different prosperity-wise, income wage-wise, comparable if you drive 5 miles and you enter the capital city of Hartford? What makes West Hartford so much more prosperous and economically viable than, let's say, Hartford, where you have a higher unemployment rate, higher poverty rate? How could two cities be so different but yet be geographically so close?
Well, we could ask that same question about some parts of Washington, D.C. Versus McLean, Virginia, right? McLean, Virginia is one of the highest income cities in America. Or we could talk about Bethesda on the Maryland side, and they are dramatically different, say, from Anacostia, as an example, in Washington, D.C.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a couple of things going on here. First is nearly every best livable area in the country is a suburb.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're in California. It doesn't matter if you're in Florida. It doesn't matter if you're in Connecticut. Now, part of that is people like to live near people like themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, if you're on my street in West Hartford, we're very racially diverse. Okay. We're racially diverse. We're also ethnically diverse, and we're religious diverse.
Mm-hmm.
All right. You know, I'm a standard Protestant, but my neighbor on the left is Catholic, and the one across the street is Catholic. Down the street, there's a Muslim person, and then we have multiple colors in our street, and we all go to the same school system. But here's what we agree on. We agree, number one, we want really good schools. So we pay high taxes. I pay really high taxes in Connecticut, say, compared if you're in Georgia or if you're in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the problems that you get in somewhere like Hartford, or to some extent, Anacostia, et cetera, you have more poor people, and they don't have the money to vote for more taxes. And the relatively rich there don't want to pay more taxes. But remember, in West Hartford, everybody wanted to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
And let me give you a simple example when I say we want to pay taxes. I lived in Bexley, Ohio. Bexley is kind of the West Hartford in Columbus for a long time. And one year, the number of kids in the kindergarten class were going to go from 15, which is what we had voted to have for a long time, up to 18. And the superintendent, I think, thought he was saving us money. So he then told us that he was going to go to 18. He nearly was fired that week because the parents were virtually strangling the guy and said, "What the hell are you doing? We didn't come to Bexley to have 18. And he said, "Well, I don't have the money." He said, "Put it on the ballot." And we voted in money short term to get over that so we'd have 15. Now, I will bet you in Anacostia, and I will bet you in Hartford, that tomorrow, if we wanted to take the elementary schools, everybody at the preschool at 15-1 teachers plus an assistant, okay, I bet the citizens will not be breaking the superintendent's neck to pay higher taxes to get that done. Now, there's a good and bad news here. The good news is, in a place like West Hartford, we make it known to government what we want and we watch them carefully. So if they start doing something we don't want, we're on top of it.
Okay.
Right? In Hartford, you have a relatively poor population who doesn't have the wherewithal to vote that money in when they want it. So that's sad. But also, they don't tend to watch government very well. And when government is not watched, government cheats. And West Hartford, the same as Detroit, the same as Washington, D.C., the same as Memphis. You don't get the same efficiency because people aren't watching them as carefully. Now, what may be unfair is the way the political lines were drawn a long time ago. Hartford is kind of blocked off from having more territory, so to speak. And I don't think anybody around it, I don't think Windsor, West Windsor, I don't think Avon or West Hartford would voluntarily become part of Hartford because they would believe they would be overtaxed and underserved in that system. I'm not positive it's right or wrong, but I'm just saying I believe that not just from West Hartford, but the same thing in Bexley, Ohio, the same thing if you're in Hyde Park up in Cincinnati, or if you were down at McLean in Virginia.
Well, one other thing, regionalism really wouldn't solve Hartford's problems of poverty because some people advocate. We have an attorney that lives here in Connecticut who's always talking about he thinks the greater Hartford area should become regionalized, that would solve many of the problems. I don't know if it would solve every problem in Hartford, but if you regionalize Hartford, I mean, it would be insane for West Hartford, Windsor to want to give up control of their school system, their police force, their fire department, and turn it over in the hands of, let's say, one government, meaning you call it Hartford County or Hartford whatever. So would regionalism be somewhat of a solution to this problem of disparities and inequities, or would it really not make a difference, John?
Well, I think in my own view, this is not my specialty today, but when I was a really young man, I actually wrote a paper on this a long, long time ago. And I thought about it a lot because I've heard this story. We should have bigger schools. We should, bigger schools end up being more efficient because you got better science labs and all that stuff. And the answer turns out to be no. Nearly every big school system in America is a bad school system. Okay. I mean, it's very tough to find a reasonably good large school system. Nearly all of the really good school systems are like West Hartford. They have very strong local control. They pay the taxes themselves. Now, and regionalism causes the same problems. If I were Hartford, and I think Hartford could be one of the most livable cities in the world. You have a wonderful climate. It never really gets cold there. People told me it did, but my wife grew up in Cleveland. Check out Cleveland if you think Hartford gets cold, okay? Right. It never really gets hot in the summer. My Aunt Sally lives in Houston. Check out Houston if you think it gets hot in the summer.
Right.
We have beautiful springs. We have beautiful falls, okay? Also, Hartford has a pretty good mass transit system. My kids knew how to take the bus from West Hartford to downtown, okay? They could take the bus from West Hartford to the community college over in Manchester. I mean, it's really a pretty good, it needs some improvement now, but it's a pretty good system, okay? However, what has to happen is, and I know people don't like this story that I've told it before, you need a moratorium on affordable housing. You don't need any more affordable housing in West Hartford because you need a slight mix in who lives in West Hartford. You need more of a balance between relatively poor, relatively middle class, and relatively upper class. A few years ago, I looked at West Hartford compared to cities like Tulsa, Nashville, others, Austin. And the number one difference between those cities was the main tax revenue for local services came from taxes on houses, on homes, except in Hartford. And they get very little money from the homeowners. So the homeowners don't have an incentive to watch government to force them to be efficient and to also change the texture of the school system. So if you want Hartford to become a better place, you need to somehow attract normal middle-class people with the other people you've got there. I'm not against who's there, but if everybody's relatively poor, then it's tough to pull up the kinds of jobs you want in the city. It's tough to pull up the school system.
I see you nodding your head, Stan. I guess you're in agreement with Professor Glascock.
There's no debate. It's a matter of accepting the reality and the truth thereof, which a lot of people don't. So you have this ongoing thing. And, you know, if everyone in town needs help, then everyone in town is dependent on someone who can help them.
Right.
Now, once that number starts to rise up above 50%, you're in like free fall. So, you know, 75% of the people in town need help, and the other 25 are the only ones that can help them. At some point, the 25 are going to start moving out.
Right. That's true.
I can't support me, my family, and all of y'all. And so now you have a town free falling. So there has to be a balance. And I think that your friend that's always talking about, you know, regionalization, that would broaden the. But you know, no one's going to voluntarily give their resources over to you. They don't mind helping you, but they don't want to be your source. So I mean, this is, you and I have this conversation all the time. I agree with him 100% because that's. I believe that to be the truth of the matter.
Okay, fair enough. John, one other thing people talk about is the need of downtown development. You hear this all over the country. And some places you have more downtown development, more downtown growth than others. How important is your downtown towards your economy and towards your influence of a city?
Well, okay, my view is the answer is zero. But lots of people with money like to lobby you to think it's important. Here's what's really important in downtown. First, it needs to be safe. I've never met a person in any state, in any country, all right, who didn't want downtown to be safe. Otherwise, they don't want to go there. They don't want to live there. And one of the problems right now with Hartford is it's perceived unsafe. Now, I don't think it is. I was probably down there once a week, because my job in real estate means I have to meet with commercial people. I meet with other people. I have lunch with them. I talk to them. I try to get jobs for the kids. I was in Hartford. I was in New York City. I was in Boston every month trying to get internships and jobs for kids. But the perception is that Hartford's not safe. So safe is the number one thing you need. Secondly, you need citizens in the city who make enough income to cover their own costs and to be concerned about how government works. Now, if you don't get that, government won't work. And so no matter what else you do, it will just be artificial. China puts new buildings downtowns in some of their cities, and they're still vacant today, right? And in America, we have lots of stuff in New York City that's not working. We have some that is. So what I would say is, first, let's make sure the city is safe, get easy transportation, and then let's work on the kinds of jobs that should be in Hartford. We're not going to get a big high-tech firm because we're not in the right part of the country. We don't have enough good engineers coming out of Yale or UConn to support the tech industry. That's just not our game. Remember, Facebook could not get enough good engineers in Boston. And they're right. Georgia Tech puts out like 5 times more engineers every year than Boston does. And we still got Emory and Georgia State and all those other places left over down in Georgia. All right. Biotech and education is what Boston does. All right. So tech's not going to drive us. But think about it. We're between New York City and we're between Boston. We could be a great service center for firms have to do auditing in New York or auditing in Boston or auditing in other New York State firms. Hartford's easy to get to all those places. And right now you could live in Simsbury or Avon or Glastonbury or South Windsor, and hopefully later Hartford, the young people. You'd have a great lifestyle, but you could service that market. So we need to think about regional service centers, quality paid jobs, but where we take advantage of our location. And we have a good airport. The airport reaches about 300 miles conveniently. Now, I can't fly directly to California, and I can't fly directly to the UK, but I know I live there. I can get to Cincinnati. I can get to Dayton. I can get to Chicago. I can get to Nashville. I can get to Atlanta. I can get to Raleigh. You got a great regional airport. Think regional service centers again. Those are white collar jobs. They don't create pollution. They tend to have insurance, all the kind of things we want the workers to have. Look, this is a case where Hartford needs to learn to get some bunts, to get some first base hits, and let's bring in people when the bases are loaded with a 2-base single. Let's quit acting like we're hitting for the outfield for the super duper home run.
Well, also in Connecticut, how come some cities like a Stamford can be such a vibrant commercialized development area? I know its proximity to New York is a tremendous benefit, but at the same time, you still have to be able to do something with your government that you have in Stamford. And obviously you have a lot of wealth that's in Stamford and in Fairfield County. So could other cities in Connecticut kind of learn something and duplicate what Stamford has been able to do? Or is it just not structurally designed that you could have a Hartford, Bridgeport, New Haven, and Waterbury duplicate the type of commercial development growth, economic growth that Stamford has been able to do?
Okay, first, I'll come back to it, but New Haven has the highest probability of any of those cities you named of making the move. But let's talk about Stamford first. Stamford is really not working commercially. The commercial office market that they tried to put in place 15 or so years ago didn't work. All those trading firms left Stamford. There's some small footprint left. What Stamford is today, in my opinion, the #1 suburb city of New York City. What I find is when I go down there, my students go to New York City, they work a year or two by living in a cramped apartment downtown. Then they learn, wait a minute, my girlfriend and I, my wife and I, my buddy and I can live in Stamford, take the train in every day. We can work on the train going in. And then on the weekend, hey, we got stuff to do. In New York City, I know everybody tells you about everything you can do in New York City. There's like this much for students, young people, zero. Young people don't go to the opera. Okay. Right. Really, young people don't go to the museums. They're wonderful. But young people want to be there on the weekends. They wake up a little bit late, go out for a nice breakfast. Try that in New York City. All right. A little bit later, maybe the wife wants to do a little antique shopping at one of the little towns around Stamford. You come back home, watch the college football games. Maybe you meet at a local pub, a bar, watch the game with friends, just like you can do in New York City, right? Wrong. Can't do it. Stamford is developing because people live there that work in the city. And then the big money is south of Stamford, of course, in Greenwich. It is really not an office market city. It's getting a little bit of throw out, and it's going to get more because of COVID. A couple of firms did move there because of COVID. All right. But what it is now is people want to live there. It's the same place to live when they work in New York City.
Okay. So again, some things that cities have or downtown have, like museums, operas, like you just mentioned, it's not what young people are really interested in. It's good to have it here. I guess there's a clientele that's going to want to go to those particular places that you mentioned. I always thought young people like clubs, bars, movies. I thought that's the young people's mindset, that if you put clubs and bars and restaurants that fit something that they like, fast takeout foods, that you'll get young people in for those avenues. But you sound like to me, you said the #1 factor is that Stamford has people that work in New York, and then it's the #1 or the largest suburb of New York.
Well, it's not the largest now, but I think it's the hottest.
The hottest.
I mean, okay. New Rochelle, back when Mary Tyler Moore was on television, was kind of the Stamford of New York City. Now, it got bigger and it got older, and people had their kids. And so students and young workers move around. Right now, Stamford is just one of the hottest suburbs. It's a great place to live. You've got all the amenities, and it's not hard to get into the city from Stamford. It's a direct train line. And I think for a while, they're going to continue to grow, okay? But having a new museum won't do anything for them. If you want to help Stamford today, the best thing would be if a private school who maybe is failing somewhere in Pennsylvania or something, if they would move to Stamford and the government would help them, because that would give local people another place to go to university. Because remember, Many people want to be within an easy commute of their hometown when they go to the university. And right now, if you're in Stanford, you've got to go to one of the private schools or come up to UConn or go into New York. And we need a local school. We need a St. Joe's, or we need a Trinity, or somebody in that marketplace to serve those local kids. They would not only create jobs, but they keep a lot of cash in that community that's leaving it now when people have to go out to college.
John, let's get on an international level, because where you currently reside in the UK, London is kind of what the New York of England. You know, would you take a city of that size, that prestige? And what are some of the issues that England is currently dealing with that many people may not be aware of?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing you need to realize is England, the United Kingdom, is becoming a poorer country every year. And the EU is becoming a poorer region every year. Let me just give you some numbers. So it's kind of like when I was in Connecticut. I tried to help local business people understand that Connecticut had a problem in Hartford and New Haven, et cetera. And people would tell me, well, no, it's just a short-term thing. And I would say to them, okay, what year do you believe Hartford, New Haven, Waterbury, Bridgeport, when do you believe they started losing population? Now, the answers would always be, well, I don't know, 1995, maybe 1990. And I would say to them, 1950.
Right.
1950. Now, Waterbury is 1970. But Bridgeport, New Haven, and Hartford were all been losing population every 10-year period since 1950. Now, maybe this year with COVID, it's going to change. But when you've been losing population every 10-year period since 1950, and I was born in 1950, so I know how long ago that was.
Right.
Okay. You can't tell me it's a short-term problem. Now, the EU and the UK have the same thing. They have been declining since about 1970. Let me give you a feel of how bad it is. But they're just like Hartford. They know it's a short-term thing. They know they're going to make that great comeback, and they know it hasn't been very long. You know, it's just been since the subprime. No. It was there long before subprime. Let me give you an example. England, the United Kingdom, is much bigger than California in terms of population. Okay? However, California is larger in GDP than all the United Kingdom. Okay? Now, it's over 10% larger, even though it's nearly like 40% smaller in population. How does one state in America blow away a whole country? I'm not talking about a small country. I'm talking about what's supposed to be a big growth country. And the reason is they protected the big firms and they've not broken them up, as I talked to you about in America. Now, they started doing this bad in the 50s. We started doing it bad about 1990. So they're ahead of us in terms of becoming a worse off country. If you've read the financial news this week, in the last 2 weeks, there have been two big trends. The euro is now 1-to-1 with the dollar. And
something with his camera stand? I think he froze.
It could be a transmission issue.
Oh. And he's not even...
Yeah, so why don't we take a break?
Okay.
Oh,
he's back. Okay.
Okay, good. This week, it looks like is $1.03 today against the pound. A pound's $1.03 against the dollar. So the pound is losing value. The euro is losing value. And the reason is these countries have not made the right productivity decisions. And one of the problems with London is so good because the rest of the country is stolen from to help protect London. They didn't let the country grow naturally. And when you artificially try to protect a big company or you try to protect one city, that reduces your overall productivity. And that's happened in France, and that's happened in the United Kingdom.
Well, John, is more people, because the trend used to always be people from Europe and England would come to the United States. But I heard that if you go to London, you'll find many different people from other parts of the country now that currently lives in London, England. So is England and London in particular starting to become a place like, let's say, London is like Atlanta, where everybody lives from another part of the country that goes and lives in Atlanta? How has London changed their population demographics over the past few decades?
Well, first, remember, London had a lot of immigration, but most of it was from India, and then some from the Philippines and Indonesia. Small amount from Africa. The UK has a very small Black population, or African American, which you prefer. Okay. In America, I call it Black if you lived and grew up here. I call it African American if you're like one of my friends who grew up in Africa, got his PhD, and he now teaches because he doesn't have any Black culture. Okay. I mean, he's African. Okay. Right. But in the UK, you have very few African Americans. You have quite a few Indians. And recently, the increase in immigration has been from Northern Europe, the Polish in that group. Okay. You also have a reasonable number of French, very few Germans. But overall, America is still the most diversified country on earth. Okay. And remember, right now, what's happening in California is a good example. Number one group in California is white, okay, and various degrees of that. The number two group by far is Hispanic.
Right.
The number three group's Asian, and the number four group is Black.
Right.
Okay. Now, the whole country is heading that direction. I don't know how fast it's going to occur, but we still are open for business with people from around the world, whether they're Hispanic, whether they're Taiwanese, they're Vietnamese, they're Chinese, they're Hong Kong, et cetera. Okay, Japanese. My cousin Betty Sue's married to a Japanese gentleman. Okay, they live in Kansas City. What a diversified world. Betty Sue grew up in Livingston, Tennessee, hick town, middle of nowhere, right? She marries a consultant from Japan and they work out of Kansas City. America's still the most diversified country in the world.
And is America still the most powerful economic country in the world as well?
Oh, by far. Okay, look, in the old days, Japan was going to overtake us and kick our butt. They got kind of close and they fell off the cliff and nobody even talks about it anymore. Recently, China was going to take over from us and kick our butt. Here's the problem. The more control you try to have over your economy, whether it be China or Russia, or even socialism in France and the UK, the less productive your system will be. Here's what we want. We want bright people to take over every generation and give us wealth, and it should be distributed. A few years back, this is about 15 years ago, I was reading an article in the UK about the wealthiest people there. 13 of the 15 were all old money people. Only 2 were new money. I then went and researched the USA. Of the 15 in America, 3 were old money, 12 were new money. I mean, when I grew up, who was Sam Walton? Who was Bill Gates? Who was Steve Jobs? Right? We allow people to do things here and push the country forward. But even today in the UK, I think it's something like 12 of the top 15, they've had their money for like 150 years. Right? Old people with money like to protect their money. They're not interested in you and me getting ahead, being more productive. But in America, we allow people to not only make money, but take over the next generation. The only thing that's wrong is we need to break up Microsoft, Google, et cetera, just like we did Ma Bell, so that the next generation can have new entrepreneurs that help us grow forward.
Well, is the United States still the strength capitalism more than socialism? Because you hear a lot of people when you get into political parties, like the right will say they criticize America moving more towards socialism, government spending programs, dependencies, and they support the free market system, you know. So where does America currently stand? Is we still strength capitalism, or is it still somewhat of a balance between socialism policies and capitalistic structure?
Okay, first of all, these are artificial arguments because nobody ever defines what they mean. Let me tell you a little bit as someone who grew up. My dad was an ag economist. He worked, he helped farmers in Tennessee learn how to not need a bull because you could artificially inseminate. That was real productivity change. You don't need to feed the bull to do his work 1 month a year. We now do this with chemistry, okay? And that's the kind of productivity change we really need in lots of fields, okay? But socialism means two things in I believe every case. One, I have the right to tell you what to do. That's the French, that's the German, that's the Brits. It's really important here for you to be on the team and you do the social rules. Now, in America, we kind of believe as long as you don't bother me and I don't bother you, you make your choice. And one of the problems we're having now, I think, with the Democrats and the Republicans, they both are trying to tell everybody what to do. And you need to drop that. You need to let people make their own decision. And some states may be different from other states. So number one, socialists always think their agenda is more important than individual rights. A simple example here in the UK. If I have a bad neighbor who curses at me, maybe even throws some of his trash in my backyard sometimes. When I sell my house here in the UK, I have to disclose that because the new buyer has the right to know that I have a troublesome neighbor. Okay. Now, maybe you like that, but you know, where I grew up in Tennessee, it's none of your goddamn business. Right. The farmer next door takes care of his horses. I take care of my horses. And, you know, we kind of work this out. But in the UK, social rules are for everybody. We're in control. And in America, no. Federal government does some things, states do the other things, cities do the other things. And if you don't like the way, I love Connecticut. I love some of the social rules of Connecticut. I love trying to help the poor. I love trying to have good highways. I love trying to have EPA that we don't pollute the air, okay? However, I have some friends who live in Texas, and they love drilling for oil, even though it contaminates the water. I think they're wrong, but I'm not going to take my gun and go down there and try to convince them I'm right, okay? But in socialism, there's one rule. Everybody has to obey it in France, in the UK. Now, the second rule is under socialism, everything comes from the top down. In the UK, all the school money comes from London. There's no local school money. And every school at 10 a.m. this Wednesday is going to be teaching the same thing at 10 o'clock because it's one system from London to the whole country. All right. In France, if it's 9:30, everybody's teaching the same thing because all the schools are paid for out of Paris. Right. So it's top down, one government. Now in America, nope. And in Germany, nope. Local big cities, local states, you control your schools. Federal government tries to influence you, but they don't have any real control. So the big difference between the two is in America, generally, we believe that as long as you don't impinge on my rights too much, you keep your rights, I keep my rights. I'm happy for you to be Muslim as long as you don't tell me how to be Protestant. I'm happy for you to be Catholic. My best friend in undergrad, been to his sister's wedding, everything. I love him as a Catholic. My good friend, the Schottensteins across the street, when I lived in Columbus, were Jewish and love them and love my kids learning how they grew up in a Jewish community. However, I don't want any of them telling me what religious I want. Okay. By the way, in the UK, you're kind of put upon if you are religious because the government doesn't believe in religion. Remember, we had a king over here who said, no, the Pope has no power. So socialism is you have to agree with me. And there's usually one major decider of the country's expenditures. And the USA, we don't do that. And I think that's excellent. I think it's what makes us great. Because if one state is really bad to the workers or bad to the citizens, you and I just move to another state. But in the UK, in France, very difficult to move unless you're wealthy. I'll give you a good example. I did consulting work for the Housing Authority in London. Free because I was at Cambridge. So consulting meant I helped with Cambridge. I didn't get any extra pay. They run a 1.5% vacancy rate in their social housing. So I said, if I'm a good mechanic in Liverpool and I want to move to London to be a mechanic, how long would I have to wait to get a housing in London? And they said, well, 3 to 5 years. Now, in America, Stan, Jonathan, if I were in LA and I'm a good mechanic and I want to move to Denver, how long do I have to wait to move to Denver?
As long as it takes to pack your van.
Right. Get in your damn car, load it with gas, and be at Denver the next day, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be housing somewhere for you in Denver to live while you start that job and do what you need to do.
Right.
But in France, in the UK, more so in China, it's very difficult to move unless you're fairly wealthy. Okay. And by the way, when you move, you leave Liverpool and you come to London. They've been giving the local school system money in Liverpool for your children. It takes them 10 years here to completely quit giving it to Liverpool and to give it to London. So London doesn't want you to bring your kids because they don't get any money that first year. Now, in America, if I move in and buy a house or pay rent, there's taxes on that. So the school system's getting taxes. Not in France, not in the UK, not in China. Okay. So I think what makes us great is, one, we're not central down like they are in Paris, like they are in London. And two, we don't try to tell everybody else how to live. And to me, those are the big differences between the American system and socialism. And I don't like the word socialism, capitalism, because capitalism is kind of funny. America doesn't believe in capitalism. If you did, we'd be Mexico. Mexico is probably the strongest capitalist country in the Western Hemisphere. Okay. Okay.
Well, John, actually, we are out of time, believe it or not. I mean, it was, again, informative and very highly interested to have you on this particular show. And again, you're based out of Cambridge, England now, so you're no longer in the United States. I don't know if people even realize that. I think I did mention it once or twice. Okay. So again, it's a great technology advantage to have the ability to interview you all the way in the UK. And again, if there's any last words that you would like to leave the audience before we end this show, the mic is yours.
Well, first, I love living in Connecticut. It was a great place to live. If my wife hadn't died and my kids hadn't left the state, I'd still be there. Okay.
Okay.
I do have property down in Covington, Georgia, where my grandkids and my daughter lives. And of course, I have property here in the UK. And I split my time. I was just over there recently down in Georgia having some fun. And I'll be over there Thanksgiving. My son lives in Arlington, Virginia, another one of those good suburbs. Guys, Stan and Jonathan, always a pleasure. Love working with you two guys.
It's always a pleasure to have you here and to see you and to know that you're doing well. Continued success. And, once again, thanks for taking time out of your schedule. I love listening to you because it backs up that I'm right when I have my discussions with John.
Hey, Stan, you're sounding like my wife now. Everything that I say she agrees with. That's good stuff.
Good stuff, right. All right,
you
John.
guys have a good day. Thank you.
Okay, John. All right.
Great interview.
Yeah, he's a tremendous asset with his knowledge, not just about economics, but other factors too. I mean, he dealt with real estate, urban development, and then obviously he studied economics. And again, he's been on 3 different times on Morning Talk Live with J. Stan McCauley's Talk. I usually don't bring a guest on. He's the first guest that I actually brought on for the 3rd time on this show. But I guess I couldn't think of a better economist to book, and he was available. But again, sometime me and you, we'll have discussions about issues, and I said, I'd rather talk
bring an
afterwards.
expert in.
Yeah, and then we could talk afterwards instead of me and you talking without the expert here.
Right. I'm not an expert. I'm very opinionated, but I'm not an expert. But I'm glad when my opinions line up with what an expert has to say. Right.
Because I was just wondering, again, I think we've talked about this, and I think he mentioned it, just because West Hartford is 5 miles from downtown Hartford, it's still really a suburb, and it's not anything unique to just the greater Hartford area, that you have a suburb like West Hartford. And I was just thinking, and I think I did ask you this before, I tried to address it one time before, Blue Black Square, I think, was a game changer. Blue Back Square. Yeah. Yes, you're right. Blue Back Square. Mm-hmm. I thought was a game changer for West Hartford, because that has been something as a mixed-use development project that I think East Hartford has even tried to duplicate something near Rensselaer Field, and that has failed, or it hasn't gone anywhere. Hartford's so much what downtown north, what they're trying to develop a mixed-use development. I think it's still ongoing. I don't think it's finished yet, and I don't know.
Downtown north?
Downtown north with the mixed-use development.
It's nowhere near finished.
Okay.
I mean, the building but downtown north conceptually and all that it includes is nowhere near finished.
But I think the goal is to have it as a mixed-use development, live, work, and play. So
we'll see how well that works in post-COVID.
Well, yes, that's true. I mean, one thing you will see is that you'll see not the commercial, but the residential housing. I think the building across from Dunkin' Donuts Stadium looks, fabulous. You can't take anything away from the way it looks.
Right. Well, I mean, it has, if Hartford's going to do better, there has to be some changes in who is going to be contributing toward the tax base. Let's put it that way. Mm-hmm. If the current population that makes up the majority of Hartford does not contribute enough, then you need to supplant that with some other group that does. Now, either you need to bring more people in, which seems to be what's happening, as opposed to pushing people out. But nonetheless, something has to change. Hartford cannot continue to be in a state of poverty.
Right.
It's the third. It used to be the fourth. Now it's the third poorest city of its size in America.
It's what, from fourth to third?
Yeah.
Okay, that's news to me. I always thought it was the fourth. Mm-hmm. Towards its population, though, towards other cities of its size, when you break it down. And I know you always are concerned with where you live at, but like he mentioned, and Mississippi is a very poor state than Connecticut. So I'm pretty sure you have many poor cities like Hartford throughout the country, even in Connecticut. Bridgeport certainly is nothing to write home about.
Poor city is a problem, because if the people are in poverty, right, and they're living in survival mode,
right,
you don't have the buy-in and the oversight the constituents need to give toward government activity, which our guest talked about. 1 week, and that superintendent was here. The superintendent, city council, mayor, they can do whatever they want. No one rises up in righteous indignation or otherwise. And so when you have the liberty of economic freedom, and no dependency on government. Mm-hmm. Government is dependent on the constituents, as opposed to the constituents being dependent on the government. It changes things. Mm-hmm. So Hartford's poverty impacts the city in ways that I think many people don't realize.
Well, I mean, if you can establish a middle class base like what you used to have, and again, I don't see how that's possible right now, because again, if you see more benefits of the suburbs or the surrounding towns, I mean, you can have all of the love and desire to want to make the city better, but sometimes you have to look at this key factors. Am I paying just too much tax? Well, he mentioned West Hartford. He had paid a lot of taxes, Professor Glascock.
But there's that's not a negative, because the taxes help support what it is you would like to have. The alternative to a good school, a good quote unquote public school, is a private school.
Private school.
So the increase that you have in taxes, I would imagine, would be far less than a private school.
It would be.
Tuition.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can make your public school a superior public school, if you can keep the class sizes down and the cost is an increase in your taxes may go up, but it's not going to be anywhere near like you're paying for tuition. These are decisions that people that have economic freedom or some liberty can make.
Mm-hmm.
In the public school, if you're living from not paycheck to paycheck, but from if you're living from state assistance payment to state assistance payment, you're living in a state of crisis almost. So you're in survival mode. So you just want someplace to put your kids.
Yeah.
So for a lot of times in urban settings, and when people are challenged economically or poor, school turns into a daycare center.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as my kids are safe and eat something, I'm good. They're going to learn because they're at school. And they don't question the school. And when they go to school, you can't get in. Then when you can get in, you're met with hostility. And they're told, well, do you really know anything about teaching your children? And so you just back down, and you're glad that they're able to do whatever they do.
Mm-hmm.
And you're good with that. That's not acceptable in surrounding towns. Simsbury, West Hartford. You go to the Board of Education meetings, and people are standing outside the hallway. There's 400 people in the room. And you need the superintendent's going to impose something on us that we didn't vote. Who's he think he is? Mm-hmm. And so there's a whole attitudinal difference. And that,
But see, I think it's still, people may not want to accept this, but I think if you really look into it, you'll see some justification. I'm not, again, telling people to accept this, but when you are grown up and you've been conditioned for whatever factor to feel powerless, that you don't have particularly you don't believe you have the power. Not someone, you may not even be powerless, but you just don't believe that you have the power. And then you're ignorant in many factors. And then there's other issues too, but those two stand out right off at the bat. I don't feel like I'm really I have the power to make changes that I think should be made. And I'm not even aware or knowledgeable enough to realize maybe what I should do. It's almost like what I mentioned to you a couple times before. You're on a ship, and I can relate to this because when my 20s, I was lost. Didn't know when this person told me, you really don't know what you want to do. So you're on a ship, and you're coasting out in the Atlantic Ocean, and you're lost. But the worst thing is you don't even realize that you're lost. So how can you get to shore and you're on this ship and you're just coasting, and then you don't even realize you're lost? Then you get another factor of, and this is where you might get into a lot of people also in our inner cities. You realize something is wrong. Now you realize that you're lost. But when it comes time to getting the type of equipment, the resources that you need to get yourself rescued, you don't seem like you have it, or you don't have access to it. Now, it could be more money. It could be more networking with the right people, or whatever factor. But that part of the puzzle seems to be missing. So when you take a group of people in inner cities throughout our country, and they find themselves pretty much lost, you're in some type of system. You may be in the criminal justice system. Now you're dealing with that. You may be in the survival mode of you're just trying to pay bills. You're trying to come up every single month with enough money just to cover rent, because you're most likely paying rent more than owning a home in Hartford. Nothing really wrong with that to some degree, but then there could be something wrong with that. But the big picture is I'm lost. I don't realize I'm lost, and I'm lost I realize that I'm lost, but I don't have the equipment. I don't have the things that I feel I need to get myself rescued. And when you combine that with other underlining issues that you may be dealing with, personal issues, how you handle conflicts, other factors of not getting along with people in your environment, you don't trust people in your environment, that sounds like a bad combination of a thriving community.
It sounds like a non-thriving community.
A non-thriving community.
Right. Well, I mean, unfortunately, people will, you're not lost anymore.
Right.
You once were lost, but now you're found. Right? No, but I mean, you're not lost anymore. Sometimes it takes people a little bit of time.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Until they find their way. Others never find their way. Some find their way right off the bat. Others have good coaches or parents or whatever the case is that can lead them in the right direction. Unfortunately, that is not something that is given for everyone. And so if we lived in the land of should, could, used to be, must be, should be, it would be great. But we don't. We live in the land of what is. And unfortunately, it is what it is. I know people don't like that phrase, but it is what it is. And that's what has to be dealt with. And so unless these individuals are met by someone who has their best interest at heart and is allowed to bring them to a particular place, then they're going to be in trouble. It is what it is. You live in a 10-story building. It's on fire. Right. And you can't get out. You need someone who wants to put your interest ahead of their own to come rescue you. So as you can hear in the background, there are fire engines. So there's firemen who go into the building. Hartford has Class A or Class 1 fire department. They go into the fire, aggressive interior attack. They go into the building, fight the fire, and rescue you. They don't wait outside and sprinkle it with water. They go in and they extinguish the fire. There's someone coming to rescue you. You're in an accident. Lifestars dispatched. They come, they rescue. They don't see whether you got insurance first. Yeah. They come rescue you and they take you to safety. There's no one coming to rescue folks out of poverty. They have to get out of poverty themselves. So there's social institutions, there's poverty mitigation programs. If these institutions, there's churches, there's mosques, synagogues, if these institutions aren't dedicated to resolving these problems with individuals, it's unfortunate, but a lot of these people are going to slip through the cracks. They're not going to prosper, and they're all going to congregate in a place. Right. And that place that they congregate is usually in an urban city or in a rural, poor section of the countryside. Poverty isn't only in the city.
No.
Poverty is there's pockets of poverty throughout the country, and we are, as a country, much better off than a whole lot of other countries for certain. Right. If you're going to be poor, the best place to be poor is in the United States. But that doesn't change from being poor. The one person who has the most impact on how their life is lived is the individual. There are people trying to get into this country right now to escape poverty. So what are you doing to actively change your situation if you are somebody who is in a state of poverty? As much as I may want to help someone, I can't help them if they don't receive the help. So when you were 20, lots of people were talking to you about what you need to do. You don't want to listen.
Oh, listen, yeah.
You wouldn't hear. You didn't receive anything they had to say, and they went on about their business because you can't make people change. They have to decide to change. You can influence them. You can encourage them. But at the end of the day, they are the change agent in their life. And our wanting them to change, while laudable and admirable, is sometimes not enough.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, it's the old theory. I think you have to meet someone halfway. At least you have to be willing to do your part. I mean, if you provide something that can help me and I'm not willing to participate or do it, then it's kind of on me. Now, if you're telling me, okay, I need to do this, you need to do that, I really can't get you what you want, but I can tell you maybe this is the way that you need to go about it. I mean, if you grow up again with the mindset that I'm entitled for something just because it's there, and then you don't realize what you have to do to be able to obtain what you're looking for. There's a difference between feeling like you are entitled for a place to live because I need a place to live, and then it's a difference between knowing what you have to do to be able to obtain a place to live. And I don't want to say everything is from the Great Society that Lyndon B. Johnson implemented with the Great Society programs, that, you grew up a generation of people feeling like, okay, free housing is available, so I'll take my energy and try to get Section 8 housing vouchers, because it's available. I know that that's available.
Path of least resistance.
Path of least resistance.
Right. Those are government instituted, mind traps to keep you where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, as it has for many, then those individuals will remain where they are.
But see, again, it may even be your expectation. If you feel like you got a Section 8 housing voucher, you might almost implement that with owning a home. You feel like, I got a good deal. I'm only paying a couple $100s a month for a place, as long as I meet the certain standard guidelines. So your expectations might have just been diminished.
Right, but Jonathan, if that's where someone's head is at, that's where their head is at. If for someone, I've talked to more than a few people who are happy because they got their Section 8 voucher.
Yes.
And if that's all they want out of life, and they're happy, well, what can you, I mean, I might say that this is not a good, but who am I to impose my philosophical view of what the standard of life should be on someone else? One can have that debate ad nauseum in a vacuum because it doesn't impact either one of us. But for the person who's going to come and tell me I've had people tell me, the Lord has answered my prayer, Pastor Stan, and I done got my voucher. Now, I don't believe that that's an answer from the Lord, but, they clearly do. And they're happy with it. I don't think that living the life of a hobo is productive. However, there are people who want the freedom and the ability to be able to go from town to town without restraint. I mean, when we start to impose our worldview on others, and, that does not mean that they're going to embrace it and accept it. And I think that sometimes we're discussing what other people set as their standard. I don't have the power to change that for the individual who wants that. Another person finds it totally unacceptable and is willing to risk their life swimming, going through danger to get into the country, knowing all of the odds against them, because they know that if they can get here, there's an opportunity to be successful. How do you take that person's desire and intent for a better life and put it on somebody who's already here and doesn't see those types of opportunities because they feel their entitlement is free housing from the government?
Well, I think the problem, or what I was trying to address, is not so much how the individual, who you are trying to pull somebody's rights or somebody's will on somebody's rights. The point I was trying to make, if the government structure sets up this type of structure and it makes it available and then it gets abused to some degree. I mean, if you remove these type of factors, these type of government programs, again, family member up in Boston feels universal basic income is the better way to go. Eliminate some of these programs, Section 8 housing vouchers, welfare. Implement universal basic income.
You don't think that'll be abused?
Well, it depends on how you stipulate it. I mean, if you set a certain...
We have stipulations on housing assistance
Okay.
and it's abused. We have stipulations on how to spend the American Rescue Funds Act money, and it's abused with people stealing $250 million. Brett Favre knows how to abuse. I mean, it's not limited to... If you have an intent to do something wrong, it doesn't matter what the system is. The criminal-minded individual will find a way.
Right.
The one who wants to do the least amount of work for the greatest return will find a way. There isn't anything you can do to stop someone else's criminal intent.
Well, maybe it's nothing you can do, but I think if you got certain, and this is where you get into the political parties' beliefs. Again, Professor Glascock didn't really want to buy into all of that. That if you support the Republican Party and you support how their political views consist of, and you support the Democratic Party and how their political views is designed to do, the perception is the Democratic Party is designed to help the least needy, the unionized. They're heavily backed by the unions. The Republican seems like it's supported by big government.
Well, that's changing.
I mean, big business.
That's changing.
It's changing.
Very much so.
Mm-hmm.
The Republicans are becoming the party of the little man and the common guy, and Democrats have become the party of the elite.
Oh.
But all of this is an illusion because it allows you to have the illusion of choice. The power elite don't care which side you're on, just as long as you come to the game.
Well, I think the party cares as long as you vote for them, you support their party. I think that they do want your votes.
They want your votes, but the people at the top give you the illusion of choice.
Okay.
In my opinion.
Well, you believe the independent thinker model. Don't even get caught up into the political party system.
Right, because it's not the party's government. It's mine. It's yours. The constituent. We're the government. They are our stewards who we allow to represent us. And when we don't like what they do, we have the authority and the ability to recall them through an election. And so they want to stay in power. Then they need to do what the constituents want them to do. And in certain towns, the constituents have far more power over their electeds than in other places. And those towns generally are towns that have economic freedom. In poorer towns, they're subject to the will of the elected.
Right.
And they are depending on them to do something for them, as opposed to, seeing them as tools to help move their agenda forward. Which Professor Glascock laid out. In the beginning of the program, but government is does things to stay in power. Parties do what they feel is in their best interest to remain in power, so they give programs to help position themselves permanently in seats of power. There are people who believe that some of these programs are not great for the community, such as your relative in Boston, and many others. But if you came to Harvard and took all those programs away, you would have outrage. Now, you want to see some outrage? And take them programs away.
Yeah.
Now people will come storming for the return of those programs. So it's a matter of what people value, what they think is important to them. And those are things that are in the heads of those individuals.
Well, I think, again, those programs is things that's relevant to the individual's lives. If you're dependent on
something, a rubber dinghy in a boat, and someone wants to take it away, you'll do whatever you have to protect it.
So you got to almost be able to, if you're trying to reach people, whether you're a community activist or whether you're a grassroots individual trying to become an elected official, you got to know how to interact and meet the people and be able to function on their level to some degree more than they're coming up to your level.
I think that's true.
You know, it's the better way for it to function. It's whether you are capable of doing it or not. You got to do it to some degree to interact with people, to really know where they're coming from. Universal basic income is just one example because of the way that the country could be moving towards that. Many jobs in certain industries are going to become eliminated. You're going to have a lot of displaced people.
They'll have to do something else. That's not a guarantee to universal basic income. There are those who would like to see universal basic income because if I can get you dependent on universal basic income, I own you.
Okay.
I own you. Instead of some major corporation owning you, the government will own you. And once it owns you, it is secured in its power. So rather than to have a select group of people who don't have the capacity to create their own means, and it's a legitimate need, you don't want them to fall between the cracks.
Right.
So the society comes to their aid to give them that which is necessary to survive and maybe have a level of comfort. They're not going to thrive under that system because that system isn't there for them to thrive.
Right.
All right. So instead of having this small group, we widen the group of dependency. We make half, if not more, of American citizens dependent on government. You are dependent on the government if you are on Social Security. You may have contributed, but the government's the one writing the check. You're dependent. If the government decides, you've been implicated in some sort of dissident action, as has been observed by your posts on social media, and so, we're gonna have to fine you with a 25% surcharge on your Social Security payment. You may want to think twice about these kinds of postings. It'll be reinstated next month, and now you start to you'll modify your behavior.
Yeah.
All right. If food rationings, well, you get a weekly stipend on your food. Well, you can only certify you're only sanctioned to be able to get your food at X, Y, and Z food distribution centers. Now you're dependent on the government for your food. You're dependent on the government for your check. It's much, much better to be able to work and earn your own money so you can spend it any way you want. There's many a woman, many a female, the chroma. Alexa, what is the chromosome of female?
Here is an answer from an Alexa Answers contributor that I translated. Women typically have 2 of the same sex chromosomes, which are written as 20. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Thanks for your feedback.
So women, I know many women, and I've heard from many women, and the argument of many women is that I earn my own money.
Yeah.
See, the woman who has a job and can support herself and make her own money is free from the controls of her tyrannical husband, who says he owns the money. And thus, if she doesn't do what he wants, he won't give her any money.
Right.
And you're going to transfer that power to the government?
Yeah.
Because that's what universal basic income will come down to. And where are they going to get the money? They're going to nationalize companies and corporations?
Well, Stan, I don't know how strong or how big social services is big, a big form of government. So
yes,
I do know the answer to that question. So it is a big form of having people involved as an industry to some degree, social service.
Right, and it also mines votes. Now, the people who are dependent on government will vote for the party that's going to continue to deliver on that resource that they're dependent on. And you buy yourself permanency in seats of government. This is one reason why cities across America have been controlled by Democrats for so long.
Well, that's what the relative up in Boston constantly criticized towards the Democratic
Party. And it's not debatable. The state of Democratic-run cities is deplorable. Mm-hmm. The education in Democratic-run cities is deplorable. And folks of color need to understand that and wrap their heads around it and stop being silly about these realities. Not that you go out and vote for different people, but that you hold the people that are in power accountable.
Mm. Well, the only thing, I would assume West Hartford is a Democratic city or town, but that still may not be the problem.
West Hartford has a town. It's a more two-party.
Two-party?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay. So it's not heavily Democratic like Hartford. Hartford is
Connecticut is a Democratic state.
A Democratic state.
But Connecticut has had a division in powers with Republican governors.
Right.
And Democratic legislators. Mm-hmm. So that there isn't one party rule. Because you can't keep the parties in check if one takes over everything. Mm-hmm. Because it's not the party's government. Mm-hmm. The government belongs to the people. The party has stewardship.
Right.
That's why I'm so anti-party.
Right. Just to switch the subject, but let me ask you a question, somewhat of the hard questions. Fentanyl is a dangerous drug that unfortunately I think could be another game changer, unfortunately, in the underground illegal drug market. The way that it gets into other forms of drugs. And I know you're not in a position to change a policy or legal policy, but if a drug dealer sells a person a drug and he intentionally puts fentanyl in the drug and the person dies, do you think a legislating law that person should be charged with manslaughter or something like murder?
Make it a capital offense.
Capital offense?
Mm-hmm. You intentionally poison someone,
mm-hmm.
then it will stop.
Okay. Well, that's what I'm saying. Unfortunately, this is another game changer in the illegal drug trade, fentanyl. As bad as the other hard drugs consist of, and I'm working, actually, believe it or not, Stan, I might be doing something related towards Lynn Bias. You remember the basketball player? Mm-hmm. And he died of a heart attack after injecting or smoking cocaine. Mm-hmm. Because when that happened, a lot of policies and laws, particularly from the national level, started to change. I don't know if it was just a coincidence or whatever the case may be, but the mandatory minimum sentences, I think, for crack cocaine, I think, was implemented at that time or shortly after. And I don't want to say that was the best solution or the worst solution one way or the other. I'm not a drug legal, believe it or not, I'm not a drug legal expert, but I know a lot of things changed dramatically because that was a period of crack cocaine. And I think him dying and his national prestigious figure had a lot of influence on a national level with the president and Congress of wanting to do something with drugs. And I think almost fentanyl, you're moving at some point, this fentanyl is going to draw something different in our drug policies because you just can't have this type of drug that could be slipped into any other drug. And then the way it's potent and what it can do to you. I just don't think the average person may not realize how dangerous fentanyl is.
Well, I think they're becoming more and more aware of how dangerous it is. There's a big conversation about all this stuff going on the border and the ease in which fentanyl is getting into the country because it doesn't start here. It winds up here. Mm-hmm. And so, U.S. policy on drugs needs to change all the way around. And, whenever there's a war, that means profit off of containment. So we're going to contain the war in I always want to say Afghanistan, but
Ukraine,
Russia,
yeah.
Right, Ukraine. So we'll contain that war. We'll send them, millions and millions of rounds of ammunition, weapons, missile systems, and we'll profit. So, same thing in any war. War on poverty. That means contain and profit. War on drugs. Contain and profit. Not eliminate. Because you want to eliminate something, you can. You can't get LSD. Where can you find some LSD?
I don't know where you can find LSD.
You can't.
I don't hear people talking about LSD, to be honest.
Because they don't want you to have it.
Okay.
You get caught with that and see what happens.
Right.
Right? Other stuff, it's not so big a deal. So who's suffering from this? Who's dying from this? Nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens in a vacuum. So if you want to stop these kinds of things, you have some very severe penalties, and I don't mean like these 3 strikes you're out and stuff, so that the prison industrial complex can benefit off of you winding up as free labor for the next 20 years in a prison. You make it something, you treat it like you do LSD, and it'll stop. It'll stop.
It'll stop, yeah. Well,
it'll stop. If you don't want fentanyl to be in the country and being sold, this is not something that can't be dealt with if the powers that be wanted to stop.
Well, I think, like you say, it's headed towards something drastic. Is going to lead towards some changes with this.
Well, I'm not saying that.
You're not.
You're saying that. I'm saying that the something drastic needs to be X. That's what I'm saying. I don't know if it's heading toward anything. Because it's increasing.
It's increasing, yeah.
Right.
Well, again, I mean, I really don't. I said I wasn't going to say this, man, but I'll just say it anyway, to be honest. A couple of weeks ago, somebody that I knew someone that died over a drug overdose in Hartford. Now, the media may have certain, I guess, rights or certain things that they report and that they don't report. I mentioned this to Reverend Henry Brown. I think he might have got in contact with the family. But I think a lot of people just don't even realize that you'll have a drug overdose death. And I wouldn't had even known about it unless the person that I knew the person. And I know in 2019, we went through a span of a lot of drug overdose deaths in Hartford due to fentanyl. And I knew of one person that got caught up into that drug. And some conversations locally with the mayor and the police chief, but nothing really dramatic. No real major attempt to figure out how can you find out where fentanyl is coming from. How do you try to prevent it? I don't know, again, what you really can do, because the drug is here. It's in the underground black market form. So whether a drug dealer knows he has fentanyl and he's putting it inside a drug, it's almost like, your drug dealers could sometime tell you that they're selling you marijuana and they're lacing it with PCP. But any smart person, well, you can't say smart, but any person, if you've been around drugs, the average person should know how marijuana smells. It has a certain smell to it.
You say the average person?
The average person, I don't want to assume everybody has and smell.
There's people
marijuana.
have no idea what marijuana even
so
smells like. If you're a user, you should know. I would imagine the person that uses marijuana knows what it smells like. I don't. It's not like you're smelling coffee and tea. Because it sounds to me like you're suggesting that you should be able to smell if there's something added to the marijuana.
I guess if you're a user, I mean, if you're in a local park and you get a smell, I don't want to say the average person would know what marijuana. You would smell something that smells like marijuana. I think you would know this is a different smell. What you going to think the smell is coming from? I mean,
you mean so people should know that what they're smelling isn't tobacco,
right?
It's marijuana.
It's marijuana. But I can't assume everybody would even know that. Neither. But there's a difference how tobacco smells and how marijuana smells. Okay. And there's a difference. Some drugs don't even have a smell, like heroin and dope. I don't even think that has a smell to it. Crack cocaine has a smell to it.
I don't know.
Okay. But
I'm sure they do, but
Right, but I'm saying is the problem of having, and we've been over this a few times in the past, of having drugs not regulated in the black market system is you have no control of what's going into the drugs. Your belief, Stan, you don't feel our drug policy should change and regulate and legalize marijuana outright and tax it and medicalize harder drugs like cocaine, heroin, and I almost would say fentanyl, but I'm not sure about that drug because I don't know. You should be on no medicalization.
Fentanyl is an extremely powerful, potent substance, and it can kill you very, very easily.
Right. But the sad part, Stan, is there are people now who want fentanyl. It's not all even an accident that there's a demand for fentanyl. I mean, point blank.
Well, Jonathan, there's a demand for any kind of, mind-altering, agent, whether it's alcohol or fentanyl or cocaine. Yeah. People want an altered state of consciousness because of all of the different things they're going through, some sort of escape. You have to talk to the end. I don't know. You'd have to talk to the individuals who seek after this, and in terms of what's wrong. That to me is a different level of help and awareness than stopping the drug from being sold or coming into the country. The demand drives the sale. Mm-hmm. But you can demand all kinds of things. If it doesn't exist, you can't get. I want to fly,
right?
And I demand to be able to fly. Okay, and so what? So my desire to fly doesn't give me the power to fly, nor does it make it something that happens. If you can't get a thing, you can't get a thing. And the access to these things are way, way too easy. And gaining access to them is extremely harmful. So, just like there are certain drugs you can't get.
Yeah.
And that people would love to get. They can make fentanyl. They can make marijuana. Well, marijuana would be different because you can grow that in the backyard. Mm-hmm. But fentanyl? You can't just go and get it.
Yeah.
So they can make that a substance that's much more controlled.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I know your belief, Stan. You don't want to give the acceptance, of telling people that it's all right to use drugs, because again, if you get into changing policies and you legalize certain drugs and you medicalize certain drugs, now you're telling people this is okay to participate in.
Right. If people are doing it when it's not okay, and it's not in their best interest, how much more are they going to do it when you tell them it's okay? It's still not in their best interest.
Right. And telling and coming to a realization that the drug is here, the demand is here. The only thing that could change is shifting the money in the drugs, and that's a big factor too. The demand obviously is a big factor. The fact that the drugs have access to is a big factor, but more than that, there's money into these drugs.
Anytime there's a demand for something, there's profit to be made, and if there's profit to be made, folks are going to do what they can. That people have no scruples, will do whatever they can to make sure that the demand is met. And then they will go so far as to market and sell the product. Mm. The drug dealer is a great salesperson because, to get people that don't do drugs to do drugs, you taste a little of this.
Exactly.
See how you hit you off right? Come back and see me. I had set you up.
A free sample.
Right.
That's how they got a lot.
That's what they do in the supermarket.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go in there, it's a new juice and new biscuit, new ice cream. Give you a sample, but fentanyl is a sample that could kill you.
Yeah, well, that's why I said I think fentanyl is a game changer in the illegal drug market, just the way it is. I mean, it's not The other drugs can kill you too, because again, the Len Bias situation, that was over cocaine. I'm not a medical doctor, but any drugs over a long period of time does damage to your body. So I understand your whole point that we don't need people using drugs. Now, you can make some argument medically wise, marijuana has some benefits, and people who advocate marijuana will tell you it's a harmless drug.
Of course they will.
Right.
They'll tell you all the benefits. Meanwhile, we live in a community that's the third poorest in the country, and you want them to be walking around high
on marijuana. Yeah.
Easy state of mind in your crisis situation. So now you just feel good even though things are bad.
Yeah.
And that's not helpful. It would be different if marijuana was a super motivator. You take a couple of hits, and now you want to go out and but I have this desire to just make changes for the better. That's not normally what happens.
Right.
So anytime anyone is trying to sell anything, they point to all the benefits of it. It doesn't matter what it is. The people want to close the airport down there. They point to all the benefits of closing the airport. The people that want the airport open point to the benefits of keeping it open.
All right.
So, because someone has a good argument for legalizing it doesn't make it a good idea. It's just, they got a good argument, but I don't think the benefits outweigh the negatives.
Well, the only benefit I can still come back to say with your the illegal drug trade, and if we could take a break, I mean, you did mention Stan at some point.
Right. I'm going to cue up the theme.
The thing, yeah. Okay. Whatever theme you want to participate in.
Well, we can take a break, or we can end.
Yeah. Let's take a quick break. I have a few things I want to say about this again.
All right. We'll take a short break, and we'll be back. All right. Stick and stay to go anywhere. Morning Talk.
To be here is our mission, full of purpose. We are driven. We are special, we have pride in who we are, and you can't break our stride. And if you see, like I see, you will realize it's not a dream. This school you make it, lessons you take it, and we work as a team. This school is better with you in it. Yeah, for every hour, day, and minute. Yeah, we are here, we are winning. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. We are loving when you're here. Yeah, and the future's when you're here. Hope you realize we do, can you believe it? Yeah, this school is better with you in it. This school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. In our school, such a given for you to learn is our mission. When we ver is what we are as a unit, and you can't bring us down. And if you see, like I see, you'll realize it's not a dream. This school you make it, chances you take it, and we work as a team. This school is better with you in it. Yeah, for every hour, day, and minute. Yeah, when you're here, everyone is winning. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. We all love it when you're here. Yeah, better futures when you're here. Hope you realize we do care, can you believe it? Yeah, this school is better with you in it. before you go. We know your skills won't fail to show. Yeah, we will call you our greatest prize. We know that you'll reach for the skies. Like a star, you'll come right through. I'ma rock with you. Nothing can break us apart because the school is better with you in it. Yeah, yeah, for every hour, day and minute. Yeah, yeah, when you're here, everyone is winning. Yeah, yeah, the school is better with you in it. In it, in it, in it. We all love it when you're here. Yeah, yeah, building futures once you're here. Hope you realize we do care, can you believe it? Yeah, yeah, this school is better with you in it. In it, this school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it. Yeah, this school is better with you in it.
Independent thinkers are Puerto Rican, Mexican, Peruvian, Indian, Bosnian, Italian, Irish, Jamaican, African American, European, straight, gay, Nigerian, transgender, Christian, Jewish, Muslim, short, tall, skinny, rich, poor, happy, sad. Some of us hold a PhD and others a GED. And though we may be Democrats, Republicans, or members of the Working Families Party, we all have escaped the plantation of party politics and become independent thinkers because we as individuals are more than a party. You see, independent thinkers come from all walks of life. And the one thing we all have in common is that we love, live, laugh, and learn in the city of Hartford. We are the constituents, and the government of Hartford belongs to us. My name is J. Stan McCauley. I'm an independent thinker, and I approve this message because it's time to stop towing the party line and vote for a candidate you can trust. You too can escape the plantation of party politics if you have the courage to free your political mind. So the question is, are they really free? There's a difference between being free and being loose.
Who are you referring to?
People.
Oh, people. Well, that's debatable. Do people really want to be liberated? I mean, I guess that's the same.
All right. A lot of people like life on the plantation.
Plantation, yes.
Free food, free housing.
Yeah.
Free shelter.
Exactly, because sometimes it takes the responsibility away from you or what you have to go through to maintain it. It's available, you have access to it. I mean, there's certain minimum things you have to do, but certainly, figuring out to pay your own way. And again, it's always the saying that you feel much better when you earn something through your sweat and labor than if it's just given to you with no stipulations. I just give you what you need and you can just move on with your life. I mean, the value, how you value things just is not nowhere near the same as when you work and earn something.
Well, when you earn it, it's yours. Mm-hmm. You earned it. No one gave it to you.
Right.
There's nothing given to you that doesn't have stipulations.
Mm-hmm. But, again, I mean, there's some real serious issues. Again, sometimes it's the perception, it's the mindset. And just want to get your opinion because, when you drive, let's say through our neighborhood, Stan, if you drive through Unity Plaza, I got to be honest, I see a hopeless structure there right now, basically. If you just look at the structural elements of that area of Unity Plaza, although there's a few things taking place close in that area. But just Unity Plaza alone as a plaza on Barber Street that is designed as a shopping plaza. It's a hangout spot. There's loitering, and it's not clean and kept up. I look at downtown Hartford. I see a lot of potential. I see a lot of things here and there that's moving somewhat in the right direction. Mm-hmm. There's still some question marks and some unfinished development, but I still see a sense of a stronger possibility than what I see. Let's say you drive up North Main Street and you start to get into that area, 06120 zip code. East Hartford, I went out to Rensselaerfield. I went out to Silver Lane, Burlington Coal Factory. Mm-hmm. It looks like it's just a ghost town, pretty much. Not really prosperous, not really kept up. I go out to Capaco Shopping Center 2 or 3 times a week. Always busy. Always a lot of people shopping. Well developed. Well, kept up overall in most cases. Mm-hmm. And you go out to Windsor Shopping Center. I went out to Windsor Shopping Center. It looks on the down end. I mean, the grocery store is still solid. A few other businesses up there is pretty much okay.
But struggling.
But struggling. And then I go to Blueback Square. I gotta make sure I'm saying it correctly. And it looks prosperous. Mm-hmm. I mean, in the summertime, when weather's nice, it looks prosperous. People are out eating, circulating. So again, Stan, every part of our community, again, is not entitled to be prosperous and to be developed. That's just not a given. You just can't say because a particular area deserves to have things like what you need, banks, grocery stores, shopping outlets, nice restaurants, nice parks, clean streets, well-maintained security. Is every community stand entitled to have that, or is it just something that you have to still work towards?
No community is entitled to that.
Okay.
You're not entitled to have that. It might be nice if you did, mm-hmm. but there's no entitle. Mm-hmm. These things don't just, the existence of these entities are the result of many different factors. And it isn't there just because you want one, or we need, or we deserve. those are, I think sometimes when people say these things, they don't understand how stuff happens. Mm-hmm. Blueback Square, I don't know if people remember when that was proposed. Mm-hmm. West Farms Mall was they went to legal action to try and stop that thing from happening. Right. And so, the people, Blueback Square is there because folks fought for it. Mm-hmm. Fought hard and put up money and investment and development. And, it takes a lot to get things going. Mm-hmm. And then, is the vision you propose going to be supported and sustained in reality, in a practical sense? There's the theory, but then there's the practice. In theory, there have been several. Well, the theory is we need a supermarket in North End. It'd be nice to put one in Unity Plaza. Now, there have been several, and they've all failed. Mm-hmm. So why are they failing? And if you can't eliminate the why they're failing, then it's not likely that one there is going to be prosperous.
Right.
Because the conditions for prosperity or success don't seem to be present. Otherwise, it would be reasonable to assume that it would be successful.
But do you see any type of mechanisms that you could implement to change Unity Plaza? I'm just using Unity Plaza as one example in the 06120 area of Hartford. Do you see anything that can change.
I could see some things that could make Unity Plaza successful. That would take, yeah. Yeah. With the existing community that's there.
That's there, exactly.
Not getting rid of those people and bringing in new folk. Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
But it takes the desire. It takes someone. It's going to take somebody that's dedicated to bringing that about for the best interest of the community, not mutually beneficial. Giving. So let's say you put a non-profit, government-supported supermarket in that place.
So it's not. So the business owner is
It's
not.
It's not a business.
He's not a business.
No,
So it's the government.
No, a government supported entity that provided the fresh vegetables, fruits, wholesome foods that were necessary in that facility. Because after all, it's a food desert, and food is medicine, and people need these things to survive. Right? If that's the argument, then why not put something there that meets that need? Because you're not going to get a business to come and do it because there's no profit.
No profit, yeah.
So there's some things government can do, and they do those things well on occasion. And sometimes if that's what you need, that's what then you have government for. So is this a cost that the taxpayers are willing to bear and incur? Just like a better school, schools that have 15 students per class. Yeah, it's going to cost. We don't have enough money in the budget. All right, then how much money do you need? Oh, well, let's put it out to a vote, and we'll vote to increase taxes. You see what I'm saying? So if it's truly something the community needs, then the community has to express that need. Not have a few people who think it's good for the community out there championing the cause. Because if the community does not support it, it won't matter how much they champion it. In my opinion.
Again, you have to still wonder, my lost theory, is the community lost in some degree ignorant of what they need in that area?
The community is unaware of what you think they need.
Right. Okay.
Do they need it? Need means something. I need air. If I don't get air, I will die.
Right.
So I need air so much that if someone was trying to deprive me of air, I would hurt them. That's a need.
All right.
Right? The need means you're going to do whatever you have to do to get it.
To get it, yeah.
Like drug addicts have a need.
They do. They do have a need to get drugs.
Do not get in their way. They don't have something that they can take from you to meet their need.
Exactly.
They may not want to steal Granny's checks,
but they'll do it.
But they will do it because they have a need. People need food.
Right.
You have to have food. People get real ugly. You want to see someone on a Jones? Meet up with somebody hungry. Folk will kill each other and eat one another. They must shop somewhere else for food.
They do, and that's what I was just going to say.
Right. So is there really a need? Or does someone think that there would a need or a convenience?
Well, what I'm talking about really is a need, not just sort of a grocery store, shopping center, but a need to have a community structure that exists where this type of goods and services that you need is available. Instead of you having to go, like, I don't live in that area anymore, and I have a car. So I can go out to Copaco Shopping Center and get what I want very easily. If I'm not satisfied and I want to go someplace else, I can go out to West Hartford. So it's flexible for me who has a car and pretty much know what I'm looking for. Then people who may not have reliable transportation, they may catch the bus, go to Save a Lot down by Main Street. They may go up the Price Right. So they can get what they need.
Clearly.
But if you live in a community and you want it to look like a community, and I guess Howard Hill, as we mentioned, is
right.
working.
And everyone on Barber Street and Enfield Street and Westland and the Cleveland Avenue.
Yeah.
Everyone over there isn't without a car. It's not like the whole community over there can't get around.
Right.
There's plenty of people with cars. There's plenty of people with means. There's plenty of people over there with money. They just don't have a supermarket there.
Well, they don't have a lot of things in that plaza. We're mentioning the supermarket as one example. There used to be a bank there. A bank, and what is some type of
the bank closed.
That's what I'm saying.
That's a business decision.
But I'm saying, what is it that area needs to be revitalized?
The area needs to be seen by business as a community that has disposable income that they are willing to spend at those places. That they're willing to bank at those places.
Right.
That they're willing to use the supermarket at those places. The laundromat, the library. The liquor store is open.
Yes. It stays busy. Burger and Pizza Land.
Burger and Pizza Land is open. The laundromat is open.
Yeah.
Though it loses money. That's a fact.
Right.
The laundromat loses money. He makes no profit. But because he believes that the community needs a place to do laundry, he takes the loss and makes up the difference in his other businesses. A lot of people don't know that.
Right. Well, we spoke to him, I think, a couple years ago.
Right.
We was up there, you running. So you and I know that.
Right. But a lot of people don't know that. So if he decides, I'm no longer willing to take a loss every week, paying people, paying the water, paying the taxes, all those things, and I can't do this anymore. And he leaves. If he retires, he leaves. No one else is going to come there because the taxes are too high for the amount of money and the regulations and all that he has to go through to keep the store open.
Right.
So there are a lot of different factors that go into maintaining these kinds of facilities. So whether it's Unity Plaza or the Burlington Coal Factory Plaza up there in East Hartford,
right.
The change has come over there. The demographic has changed. The community is not as prosperous as it was. The shopping center over there by where the supermarket is, where Stop and Shop used to be, that place is declining.
Decline, exactly.
So there's no longer a population to keep those places in business. People are shopping elsewhere. They no longer want the services that are provided there. I don't believe that's government's job necessarily to make happen. Communities evolve and change.
But the key thing you mentioned is you're not entitled a vital community just because it's available or it can be available. There's a process that you have to go through. As you mentioned, Blueback Square, there was a lot of resistance. But you're seeing the benefits now, obviously. So if you put something in a community, whatever they're trying to do throughout America of developing urban cities to be what they can be, clearly there's some missing pieces that's not been that effective overall. I think Professor Glascock mentioned it earlier that suburbs continue to grow and to some degree flourish, although I wouldn't say East Hartford is really a flourishing suburb. I mean, you have East Hartford is like an imbalance. You got some growth. You got Pratt and Whitney there. You got Coca-Cola, I believe it's still in East Hartford. You got a lot of car dealerships of what's that street? Connecticut Boulevard. And you got some low-income, rundown areas. What's that street? Burnside Avenue. I mean, I wouldn't say that's anything to write home about. I think the Mayberry Village. I don't know if that I think that Mayberry Village is still available. But again, you're not, I guess the key thing you said, Stan, you're just not entitled a vital community where you have all of the goods and services and things that
Some communities are never going to have those things. That's just the cut right to the chase. They may be desirable. And so folk that live in those communities at some point will say, you know what? I deserve better. My kids deserve better. And I'm moving.
We're moving, okay.
And they will move out of that community to some place that has the things that they want.
Right.
And that community will continue to go into decline. And that's usually what happens. People start leaving the community. They're voting with their feet. People have a right to want and desire and express that by going toward the communities that serve the needs that they have. But there's no you can't make business move into your community, but you can move to where there are thriving businesses.
Right. So individually, you can do things to be able to participate in the community. But if you are a person in a community and you're a champion trying to revitalize the community like a Howard Hill or anybody else throughout the country, or at least that's what they claim they are, I would assume even you, when you ran for mayor a few times, had a vision to implement things in Hartford. I would even say question you, Stan, why not just try to get Y3K Global Media in Bloomfield? But again, it wouldn't really serve what you was looking to do if you champion Ronnie to put that business there, right? Than trying to hold your breath, hoping that you, and I hate to say it on a negative way like this, that you become mayor to get the business here. But again, you could have had something.
But once again, in order to bring my plan to fruition, it needed to have someone who was willing to come here and do those things. There are a lot of things in play. Elections have consequences. All of this, everything was predicated on me winning. If I would have won, that means there's an attitudinal change in the community.
Right.
Without the attitudinal change in the community, it won't work. The community is where it is now because of the way the attitude is. And the consciousness of the community being what it is why it is where it is.
Right.
If that community changes, that would be reflected in the election results. It did not happen. So without that, if Y3K Global came apart from the plan that we had, it wouldn't have worked. No more than the places out there in South Windsor worked.
Right.
It doesn't work because you want it to work. It works because there's a need and a desire for something better and change. The first place that need is exhibited is at the election booth. If you can't get those people in that community to express the change they want, with a realization that it's achievable, then they have made their decision. Elections have consequences. So if we use that same theory and take it all the way to where we are now, has the community changed with the current administration?
Let me examine that. You're talking about the current mayor and the current city council.
Right. And I don't mean this personally against the mayor or anything, but has that community changed? Up there by Unity Plaza, all up and around those areas, Cleveland, all of that, has that changed for the better? Unity Plaza is still the same.
Right.
Barber Street is still the same. Cleveland Avenue has some new blacktop, new curb, but other than that, it's still the same.
Right.
Right?
Well, that part is the same. I would say, and the mayor had nothing to really directly to do with this, but Westbrook Village and Bowles Park has changed dramatically.
That was underway before the mayor.
Way before. It just finished.
Right. It finished
watch.
under his administration, but that was underway, and those are different. Those are different pots and pockets of money and different things that cause those things to happen. All right. Has Albany Avenue? I don't mean Albany Avenue. Well, has North Main Street changed?
No, the last I drove through North Main Street,
there's still flooding down there. There's still no high speed broadband down there. There's no supermarket down there, even though Max Katari wants to put one down there. The buses that were moved out are back.
Yes.
What has changed?
Right.
Nothing. So people have the government they deserve because that's the government they voted for. Always. You always have in the United States of America. You always have the government you deserve because you get to vote for them.
Yeah, minute or whether the mayor had anything to do with it. When he won the last election, I overheard some people saying that, and I guess he promoted, Mayor Broner promoted this on his TV ads. He stopped, or he got the city out of falling into bankruptcy. He took that as a good accomplishment.
That's great.
Right.
And he is not the only one that had. I won't get into that. Let the glory fall where it fell, because all the powers that be wish that to be so. But no, for sure, it was not him and him alone.
Okay.
All right. Having said that, that's a fabulous achievement. Has that helped Unity Plaza? Has that helped Barber Street? Has that helped North Main Street? Has it helped Cleveland Avenue, with the exception of the speed bumps and the new curb? Has that helped?
No, it hasn't helped those factors that you just mentioned. No, it has no.
Vine Street.
No, the last I went through Vine Street, I haven't seen anything dramatic. I mean, there were some new homes being.
Enfield.
Well, Enfield, no. I mean, there has been some new home remodeling that went on from Vine and Albany Avenue, but I don't know if that's, again, had anything to do with the mayor's policies. But they did revamp those buildings from
Albany. Down on Albany Avenue. Albany Avenue's been in works since 2007.
Okay.
Under the Perez administration, that stuff was hard fought for. It's just now coming to fruition.
Right.
But it takes time for those projects to happen. That takes time.
No, there's nothing grandstand of those areas that you just mentioned that you could say the mayor had a direct role.
And that is not a dig at the mayor or the city council. I'm simply suggesting that nothing changed. We were presenting change because our focus would have been different.
Right.
But in order for our change to work, it means that there had to be a collective rethinking among the people who are going to be the main participants in the change.
Right.
And there has to be buy-in broadly, because you can't make people do stuff. They have to want to do stuff. And as I say, the first place that want is exhibited is at the polling booth. Do people want change?
Now the development that's going on in downtown North, did Mayor Bronin had any role involved with that? Or
No.
He had no role?
That was Pedro Segarra.
Okay.
Because it was all built around the baseball stadium. That was under the Segarra administration.
Right.
It's
true.
now coming to fruition. Very rarely do mayors implement ideas and see them realized in their term.
Okay.
It takes too long for stuff to happen.
Right.
Mayors take credit for things being done during their term. All mayors. All right, but they don't. It just takes a long time for government to do these things. Major road changes, community changes. You got to get buy-in from the community. You got to go around. You got to get, there's permits, and there's, digging, and then you got the gas company, the electric company, the cable company. Stuff is underground. Things need to be rerouted. All that stuff. The water company. All those things have to be done before you put anything in the ground. Stuff has to be inspected. And I's got to be dotted. And contracts got to be signed. And money's got to be raised. All of these things happen when the ideas are green lighted and permission is given. And so it takes a long time. People don't realize it. They just see it. Oh, look what so and so did. Oh, there's a whole housing community. It didn't just pop up overnight. Lots of things had to happen. If people live in a place, they have to be relocated. What's going to take to get them to be relocated? Is there going to be pushback? There's going to be buy-in. So a lot goes into play.
Well, again, the mayor and the city council, a lot falls under their table of city services. You know, I got obviously the streets, the sanitations, the public works department. Is your streets being swept and clean? Is you having good equipment? He can appoint or hire the police chief. So has that been a reflection on public safety? I think Hartford just got some high accreditation, one of the highest. I don't know all the exact details.
Yes, it just
accredited
happened.
the city. So that sounds like a good thing. I don't know. Again, I don't know anything about it. I haven't really looked into it. Still, people got issues of public safety. They don't really, perception-wise or reality-wise, feel that the city really is safe as it can be. I mean, there's the
city is safe.
It's safe.
It could be safer. There's a perception, but that perception is complicated. It's a big challenge for anyone to be able to change that perception.
Well, I agree with that part, Stan. The numbers, though, if you go 28 homicides, I think Hartford leads all cities in Connecticut as the highest homicide rate. So,
well, I have said over and over again, from way back, I know Jonathan's smiling because you already know what I'm going to say. The mayor has nothing to do with that.
Right.
I don't care who the mayor is. The mayor has no control over that. I think they can be instrumental in certain things, but the mayor has no control over that. If the mayor had control over homicides, then there wouldn't be any.
Yeah, but I think one thing I will say, I mean, if I'm a mayor, I would certainly feel better if the city has a low homicide rate than I would.
Yes, absolutely. So it's in your best interest, and in every sense of understanding, to make sure that it doesn't happen. If it was within their power, I'm sure no one would die from homicide in Hartford.
Well, you can't directly control homicides, but I think public safety, how you instrument the police department, who's your police chief, I think that has some reflections.
Oh, obviously, those things. But the perception is not linked to how the police treat constituents. That's not a perception in Hartford. I mean, the surrounding towns no more care about that than Hartfordites in general care about how Rocky Hill police treat their citizens.
Right.
They're worried, can I walk down the streets of Rocky Hill at night?
Yeah.
Not being bright.
Right. Okay.
All right. Or can I walk down the streets of Hartford at night? Being bright. So, people think of terms of my personal safety in the environment. And right now, that perception outside of Hartford is that it isn't safe. With some people.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to go anywhere in Hartford at any time of the day or night.
Yes. Well, that's one thing. The city having problems.
And the city is safe.
Yeah, well, it's safe, but the numbers still don't give you a good reflection.
Yeah, but the reality is, as Chief Darrell Roberts said, most of these things become victims of lifestyle. Altercations between individuals.
Yeah.
Vengeance. This is not the average person walking down the street getting,
Well, I think you will
attacked,
but I think you will agree vehicle related deaths, that is still a problem that you wouldn't. Although I was driving from the airport, there was a person driving the wrong way on I-91, so things can happen. Pedestrians being hit by vehicles, I still don't know if you got to really be on your P's and Q's walking.
Well, that's something that you could take care of with some creative policing.
Yeah.
At least that's what I've been told.
Okay.
With your traffic division.
Right.
But now on that end, there's something that could be done. But homicides, the police have people don't have control over that. The way homicides happen robs you of the opportunity to have control because you just don't.
Yeah, well, the homicides and let's say the day-to-day criminal activity, again, you can say the mayor and the police department, although I think the police department can play an influence in the role now. I mean, people will think twice if, certain things you can do in Hartford that you can't do in other surrounding towns.
Like speed recklessly.
Recklessly. You're not going to get away with that in West Hartford, Bloomfield to some degree. But again, I mean, what speed bumps is not really the big. Speed bumps are part of a solution. I think people will think twice speeding on a street that has speed bumps.
If you got a car that hangs low, you'll think twice about going down that street at all.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true. So those are some things that people like when they see speed bumps implemented. I think Steve Harris on Cleveland Avenue probably had something to do with that. I know he had something to do with that light on Cleveland Avenue and the Main Street being fixed. So there are some things that you can work towards and change. The big issues, though, as I mentioned, a community where you have the type of development and resources you're saying is just some degree non-existence. If people are not going to be able to support these businesses,
people won't support them. Business won't come.
But if you turn everything into a government-owned, then it doesn't really matter because
the only thing I was saying about government-owned was the supermarket in a food desert. If people want this, then that is a viable solution that meets an immediate need. If it becomes a public health issue, and that's the way it's being crafted, so then that's what you should do. You don't have to incentivize business to come.
Yeah.
If they think they can make money.
Right.
If business thinks they can make money, they'll do they'll bribe people to come. They'll pay you.
Yeah. Well, Stan, again, you may say the city is safe and you feel safe, and I don't dispute that. I mean, overall, I think, it's, you get involved in some things now, what your risks are. So I think that's to some degree. Somebody overdosing in your city over drugs, you can say that's probably a drug issue more than a public safety issue. Although I think public safety, drug as a health issue, it has to be looked at more than anything else, a serious problem.
I'm sure they are looking at it as a serious problem.
Yeah, well, again, if you got fentanyl circulating on your streets and people
but Jonathan, as you mentioned at the beginning of that discussion, this is a nationwide problem.
It is a nationwide problem, and I think that's why I mentioned the Len Bias incident. I think his death had some influence on changing some federal drug policy. Now,
I don't think it'll take the death of a high-profile individual for fentanyl. Everyone is aware of fentanyl.
Okay.
They hear about it in the news. The whole border issue has blown fentanyl up in terms of it coming in the country. So not everyone, but people whose ears are tuned to what's going on in political circles and casual observers that are very engaged with this whole election coming up in the midterms are aware of fentanyl. Something needs to be done. The what needs to be done, I guess, is yet to be determined. But I think all of the powers that be are very well aware that something needs to be done. I'm sure every elected official across the country has an open ear to anybody who has a solution.
Well, you said your own personal opinion, turn it into a capital crime. If you are a drug user,
not a user,
I mean a drug dealer,
and
you're selling, and intentionally that you're putting fentanyl in a drug, then you saying turn that into a capital crime.
Make it a capital crime.
Yeah.
Yep. If the death of an individual due to fentanyl can be linked back to you, capital crime.
Okay.
All the way back. Everyone who had a hand in it. The street corner dealer, the person he got it from, the group that they got it from, everyone involved, all the way back. Just like if you run a bar, the guy leaves out your bar drunk, there's a level of responsibility for the owner of the bar.
Yes, it is.
So now he's incentivized to make sure you're not leaving out of here drunk. No, that's the last drink you're going to get. No, give me your keys.
Okay.
I'll call you a cab. See, it changes the perspective. Make these people personally responsible, and it turned into a capital crime. Now suddenly, look, man, I can't sell this stuff. We got no. Now I'm not catching that one, you know.
Right.
Because there's some things folk won't do. There's some things folk won't sell.
Right.
Because the consequences are too high.
Too high, yes.
Right now, the consequence isn't too high. In fact, there's an incentive. Hundreds of millions of dollars of incentive.
Right. But I think your big picture, like a few other people, is you just don't want the drugs to be available. You would rather just not have the drugs and then not have people turning to drugs. I mean, that's your ultimate solution. The only exception is you will decriminalize drugs. You have mentioned that you will change you are in favor of the policies of decriminalizing drugs, but that's as far as you're willing to go on any dramatic drug policy change.
If there's going to be anything, it would be to decriminalize certain drugs. Okay. Not all drugs.
Not all drugs.
Certain drugs. Other drugs need to remain illegal because it's not beneficial for the greater good of the whole. The country is not benefited by that.
The only argument I have with that is people are getting the drugs and using drugs,
and they will continue to do so. Yes, absolutely. I have no illusion that it's going to disappear.
Right.
So with the laws being what they are, and people saying, you know, and if right now you can't, they're illegal and you're finding a way to get them, we understand that.
Right.
If you decriminalize it, those, not only are they going to get it, new groups of people will go out and get it. Kids, all kinds of folks. There has to be a standard that says this is unacceptable, period. That doesn't mean that people won't continue to try, but the standard says if you get caught, this is going to be what happens to you. And folk change, if they'll change.
Sort of like the methadone clinic. I mean, you got access to that, and people are in lines every single day
because they need help.
They need help, yeah.
I'm not saying we're not going to help people.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to make it legal so that the people who want to do wrong can. Society ought not be. Society ought not be. The rules of the society ought not be determined by the wants, needs, and desires of those who are, one, in a super minority, right, and two, breaking the law. We don't adjust everybody in the society that are doing well, bring them down to the level of those who aren't doing a particular thing but want sanctioned to do so and don't want to feel stigmatized or feel like they're doing something wrong, so everyone else has to change. It's time out for that.
Yeah. Well, you look
it's time out for that.
But see, you look all across the board between gambling now is legal in just about every state,
and it shouldn't be.
States. Alcohol has been illegal for a long time. You can debate that. Prostitution, I think, has changed in some counties in Nevada, and it's just things. Sometimes people just say, people want it, let's just regulate it. But it's not that simple, just legalizing and regulation things. You can look at some examples of other countries.
We're running out of time.
We're running out of time. So.
We will stop the music once.
Okay, good show, though. I had enjoyed participating on this morning's show. And let's put together a good schedule for October. I'm
looking forward to it. It's always fun. Jonathan Smalls here every Monday. Wednesdays, Dr. Maya Bowen, along with Luis Delgado. Friday, Cleo Duke Wright and myself. So, join us every day. Always something new. Of course, at nighttime, for those of you that like the kind of stuff, Bible study, 10 o'clock every night. Join us. All right. So join us every day at 8 o'clock and every night at 10 p.m. And there's always something great happening. All right. You all have a blessed rest of your day. Jonathan.
Yeah, Stan, I appreciate you giving me the platform every week to book guests and co-host the program with you. And again, I'm looking forward to a good October of guests. I think you're going to like some of the topics. If a few things can work out, I'm going to be looking to book towards the guests and the topic. And, you know, you do the same with your shows on Wednesdays and your Light Source Victory programs. And, again, like I say, keep up the good work.
All right. We'll see you next week.
All right.
All right, my friends. See ya. Bye.